Yi Qinghan's entire body exuded an indifference that kept people thousands of li away. When he saw the person waiting for him, there was a chill in his eyes. You've come out. The gentleman smiled, but the smile didn't reach the bottom of his eyes. What are you looking for me for? Yi Qinghan asked indifferently. Do you know the plan of the devil race? The man asked. When he mentioned the devil race, Yi Qinghan's eyes spread with ice. He furrowed his brows and said, you mean the plan where they want to wipe out all the elite pupils of the 6 sects? I know that. No. What I want to ask is that did you know there's a devil race altar in the land of inheritance? The man asked. I didn't. Yi Qinghan shook his head. You mean that the real purpose of the devil race isn't to destroy the elite pupils of the 6 sects, but for the altar? According to the secret information I obtained, the superiors of the devil race of the hidden city want to welcome the arrival of the split souls of the devil race from the upper world. The man paused, then said, but it's also one of their plans to absorb the elemental essence of the elite pupils of the 6 sects and kill them all. What does it have to do with me? Yi Qinghan sneered indifferently. He was the young lord of Tianyuan City and not some city lord. Not to mention, he wasn't interested in the affairs of the devil race. You're from our C race. Our C race and the devil race have always been mortal enemies. Naturally we need to destroy her plans. The man immediately changed the conversation and said with a smile, what's more, if Tianling continent is invaded, won't you be affected too? So what? If the devil race really want to invade Tianling continent, then the superiors of the 6 sects and the major forces would take care of it. What right do I have to interfere? Yi Qinghan replied indifferently. His attitude was clear, and he added, and I don't have any interest in the matter of the C race, you don't need to talk about this. Inwardly, he was actually very rejectful to the identity and bloodline of the C race. After all, he had lived for so many years as the young lord of the human Z clan. The expression on the man's face didn't change when he heard him say this, as if he had expected it long ago. A dark light flashed in his eyes, then said with a deep meaning, you don't care about Tianling continent, you don't like the identity of the C race, but you're not indifferent to Lu Mu Yen, are you? Yi Qinghan froze, then raised his head and narrowed his eyes, asking dangerously, just what are you trying to say? Yes, he really didn't care that much about the survival of Tianling continent, and he was pretty opposed to the identity of the C race, but Lu Mu Yen was the only softness and light in his heart. Since the identity of him as a C race was revealed, although the Yi clan didn't attack him, but their attitude suddenly changed, and his seemingly affectionate father immediately expelled him from his clan. Even his little sister who he had doted on growing up since childhood was silent after hearing about this, obviously unable to accept his identity. The fact that he was brought back to the Yi clan by the madam of the Yi clan meant that the real young lord of the Yi clan was actually dead. In the hearts of the current Yi clan patriarch and Yi Qinglu, he was an outsider who occupied the position of their family. There was a hint of ridicule on his lips. Even though Yi Qinglu was still attached to him to their sibling relationship, but her attitude was obviously a lot more alienated and cold. Only Lu Mu Yan's attitude towards him had never changed, whether he was the Yi Qinghan from the human race or the Lan Zi of the C race. He believed that their friendship wouldn't change because of this. She should have guessed a bit about his identity that day, that's why she said so no matter how Qinghan is, or what you will do, I will always stand behind Qinghan and become your backup as a promise. The gentleman chuckled, thinking that was indeed the case. Now, in Yi Qinghan's heart, Lu Mu Yen was probably his only dawn and true love. There have been many attempted assassinations on Lu Mu Yen by the hidden city. This time, she and Qi Xiu also destroyed devil race's plan to Kali's elemental essence and kill the elite pupils of the 6 sects. The man asked with a smile, do you think that after the devil race's holy maiden descents, the hidden city would let her out alive? Just tell me your purpose directly. Yi Qinghan's eyes were cold, and he stared sharply at the gentleman. Lan Si, don't think I don't know your little plans. I know everything about what you did in Falling Ghost River. The gentleman, Lan Si, let out a chuckle, and when he raised his head again, the warm and jade-like temperament on his face disappeared completely, adding a bit of a tyrannical evil aura. I've never denied my interest in Lu Mu Yen. How about we work together? Lan Si said with a half-smile, after all, we're not only members of the C clan now, but also belong to the party who desire but cannot obtain. Yi Qinghan raised an eyebrow, asking, how do we cooperate? I heard that Lu Mu Yen and Qi Xiu already went public about becoming dual cultivation partners, and Lu Mu Yen and the others should also know the existence of the devil race altar. They plan to go to the devil race altar in 2 months to destroy all the plans of the hidden city. Lan Si continued, let's go and help give them a push, not only fulfilling our mission as a C race, but also helping Lu Mu Yen. Do we need to cooperate on such a thing? Yi Qinghan looked askance at Lan Si, you should have made preparations long ago. How about we cooperate to get rid of Qi Xiu secretly? By then, we'll compete for Lu Mu Yen with our own abilities. Lan Si's eyes hid his determination to win. By the way, Qi Xiu isn't his name. His real identity is Monarch Ming of the Ming Chamber of Commerce Alliance. His name should be Ming Xiu. He added with a faint smile. Yi Qinghan quietly raised his eyes to look at Lan Si, then his lips rose with ridicule. Lan Si, do you think everyone's the same as you? You can find out his identity secretly, you think I can't? Yi Qinghan said with ridicule, I am hostile towards Ming Xiu, but I won't act against him, because that will only push Lu Mu Yen away from me. I am in love with Mu Yen, and I also hope that one day she can accept but I won't obstruct her happiness because of my selfish desires, and definitely won't destroy it. He sneered and said lightly, such a feeling, you, as the king of the Southern Sea, probably will never understand. I sure didn't know that the cold-hearted, black-bellied Yi Qinghan still hid such grand feelings. Lan Si also said with a smile of ridicule, desire by can't obtain, so you want to sacrifice yourself to help her? Stupid, not a single word of ours match. If there's nothing else, I'll leave. Yi Qinghan didn't want to cooperate with Lan Si, this man that was a wolf in fox fur. Lan Si smiled devilishly, the matter of going to the altar. It was just that he had yet to finish before being interrupted by Yi Qinghan. I will go to the altar in 2 months, but it has nothing to do with you and the sea race. His distant attitude was obvious, and without waiting for Lan Si to speak, he took a step and vanished in place. Lan Si's eyes narrowed, then his plans changed, and a deep, meaningful arc rose on his lips, then he turned and vanished as well. Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu, who were in the inheritance hall, went to the main hall where the manuals were placed together. Previous chapter. After Lu Muyen finished advancing, Ming Xiu didn't suppress his cultivation base either, and it took less than a day for him to advance to Sword Saint, and he also advanced to the peak of Sword Saint. In order to enter the land of inheritance, he deliberately slowed down his advancement, otherwise he would have advanced to Sword Saint 3 years ago. Now that he was no longer suppressing it, the elemental energy that was being sealed by an array in his body was too boundless, enough to sustain him to peak phase Sword Saint, so there didn't exist the problem of his cultivation base rising too fast and being unstable. Ming Xiu's talent and strength also surprised Lu Muyen, but she was more proud than anything. After all, he was her own man. The two didn't waste any more time and they both went to the main hall after advancing. The method of opening the main hall was the same as the previous side halls, but the moment the two channeled their soul energy into it, a sudden change occurred. The two were sucked into the main hall by a force, but the scenarios they encountered were different. Lu Muyen opened her eyes and saw a few crystal walls before her. The crystal walls exuded a gentle light, and there were constant images of her and Ming Xiu from their first meeting to falling in love. She watched with great interest, and gradually, it was as if her mind was immersed in it. However, the images began to change slowly, and the final scene actually turned out to be Ming Xiu sitting in a luxurious palace, wearing a golden crown too, embracing two stunning women and looking coldly at her. Then she and Ming Xiu completely tore apart all pretenses. She was abandoned by him, then later framed by the women in his harem and their clans, until her cultivation base was destroyed, utterly downtrodden. She escaped with monstrous hatred, then recultivated only to seek revenge against Ming Xiu and those women. The scene in Ming Xiu's side was also about him and Lu Muyen meeting and falling in love at the beginning, then the style of painting automatically filled in their future. Lu Muyen was embraced by a handsome man and there were several outstanding men standing around her. She looked at him coldly and broke off with him for her men. Then he was completely shot down into an abyss by the men in her harem. He didn't die, and after being rescued, he began to wait for an opportunity to take revenge. When they saw the revenge scenes, both Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu revealed an arc of ridicule on their lips, one and the same. With a thought, the images in the crystal walls in front of them shattered inch by inch and the figures of the two were also revealed. As soon as Lu Muyen raised her eyes, she met Ming Xiu's eyes, and both of them saw infinite, firm trust in each other's eyes. Congratulations to the two of you whose love is even more solid than gold, successfully escaping from the illusion. You are qualified to inherit our inheritance. An old and distant man's voice sounded in the hall. After the man's voice fell, a woman's voice sounded. I hope you can guard your origins and remain together until old. Thank you, seniors. The two bowed deeply to a painting hanging in the hall. The painting above showed a graceful man in white and a beautiful woman standing beneath a cherry blossom tree, playing the zither and shao, extremely gorgeous. After the influence of the previous illusion, Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu's hearts not only didn't feel any estrangement, but they grew even closer. Only because the other party believed in them so much. Neither of them loved the wrong person. If, during the time in the illusion, even one of them was confused by the scenes and fell into it, they would gradually lose their origins and fall into a whirlpool of revenge forever. Yenner, let's go see the inheritance of the main hall. Ming Xiu held Lu Muyen's hand tightly. Lu Muyen smiled sweetly, sure. There were more than 10 little balls floating in the hall, and each ball had a layer of restrictions on it. However, because Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu passed the test, as long as they channeled their soul energy into it, the restrictions on the balls would automatically be lifted. Lifted. The two looked through the balls one by one. They all contained inheritance manuals from ancient times, including a scroll of a heaven-rank soul skill. The so-called soul skill was a means of using soul energy to attack. As long as their mental energy and soul energy were strong enough, even if there was a huge gap in cultivation base against the opponent, one could still use soul attacks to turn certain defeat into victory. After the inheritance of the other manuals were finished, there was a more profound soul skill inheritance in front of the two of them, and most of the soul skill methods within were joint attacks. 10 days later, Ming Xiu and Lu Muyen walked out of the inheritance hall, and the pendant around her neck hid Jun Luo Chen, who was merging with his split souls. Boom boom. Before they left, they heard a few loud noises from the hall behind them, and then it completely collapsed. The two bowed deeply again in the direction of the hall that had turned into a pile of rubble. After exiting the inheritance hall, the two found several more inheritance halls according to their sixth sense and continued inheriting. During this period, Bing Ji also successfully picked quite a few moonlight herbs, and even caught a few newborn moonlight beasts, both male and female. Why do you capture moonlight beasts? Lu Muyen reached out and stroked a young beast as she asked Bing Ji. Bing Ji chuckled mischievously and said, Owner, didn't you say that the moonlight herb is very rare and precious? I just thought that since moonlight herbs are the companion herbs of moonlight beasts, then I'll catch a few and bring them back and raise them, and we'll have no shortage of moonlight herbs in the future. Lu Muyen chuckled, you're sure smarter this time. Moonlight herbs were very useful. In particular, many pills used to treat illnesses needed moonlight herbs as an ingredient to enhance the efficacy of pills, as well as being the main ingredient. If someone else caught moonlight beasts back to raise, they wouldn't know when the moonlight herbs would mature, but she had the ripening function of her ice bangle, so there wouldn't be a shortage of moonlight herbs of older years in the future. This time, Bing Ji sure made a correct decision. Bing Ji raised his head and said proudly, "It's my duty to share owner's worries." With owner's brilliant alchemy skills, this moonlight herb can only exert its greatest value in owner's hands. Long Yao listened to Bing Ji's flattery, then pursed his lips. "This stinky bird really is a sycophant, I despise." Here. Lu Mu Yen looked at Bing Ji, who was still flattering her endlessly with amusement, and took out a grade 6 pill and tossed it over. "You did a good job, this is a reward." Bing Ji's small eyes instantly narrowed together in a smile and he swallowed the pill in one gulp. "Owner's the best." This time, because it was a pill reward for Bing Ji's meritorious service, Xue Xue and Qi Huang didn't compete for it. Long Yao, who was originally hidden, widened his eyes. He was just thinking why this stinky bird, Bing Ji, could flatter so well. So it was because after he flattered, there'd be a grade 6 pill reward. Female owner, if you want to look for spiritual herbs, you can let me go next time." He immediately revealed his figure and looked at Lu Mu Yen with a flattering smile and said, "What of running some errands for some pills? Small deal." When Bing Ji saw that Long Yao actually wanted to take his place, he immediately exploded. "You stupid dragon, scram to the side, what does owner wanting to find spiritual herbs have to do with you.n/o/vel/b/in.c? You stinky bird, shut up, be careful lousy beat you up." If Mo Yen scolded him, he would think it was aloof and cute, but replaced with Bing Ji, Long Yao quit. Bing Ji had long disliked this stupid dragon. "Lousy is the one who wants to beat you up." This stupid dragon not only wanted to snatch their boss Missouri, but also wanted to compete with them for Lu Mu Yan's favor. He wanted to beat him up for a long time now. And so the dragon and bird who didn't like each other instantly fought into a mass. Ming Xiu and Lu Mu Yan were very speechless when they saw this, but they didn't bother to care about them. 2 months passed in a hurry, and soon came the promised day. One plot hole. If I remember correctly, back in chapter 355, yes I went back to check, it took me a while to find it too haha along the way I realized how many noun translations I've changed. I need to go back and fix those eventually. Anyways, he said he had already advanced to Sword Saint and he was using a secret skill to hide it so he only looked like a Sword Venerable. Well here it says he hadn't yet advanced to Sword Saint. Well, maybe you could take it as he's been suppressing it the entire time, although my understanding from chapter 355 was that he was already Sword Saint, it was just that he used a secret skill to hide it, not that he's suppressing it. There's no translation mistake. Oh well, no need to think too deeply XD. 2. When I typed in the original words for Golden Crown, in Google and Baidu, many pictures were of the European-style crowns, but there were also pictures like this. When Lu Mu Yen and Ming Xiu arrived at the appointed place, the others had already been waiting for a while. "Little sister/junior sister/Mu Yen." Seeing the two arrive, they called out with a smile. Lu Mu Yen walked before the people with a smile on her face. "You all had a good harvest, right?" Lu Mu Bei's aura was much stronger than before they separated. Except for Luo Li who was at peak phase Sword Sovereign, the other 3 had broken through to Sword Saint Cultivation base. "Not bad." Su Jin smiled elegantly. Lu Mu Bai nodded. "This time, the harvest is pretty good." He accidentally found an inheritance hall which turned out to be left behind by a senior sword master who also cultivated the blood spirit skill. He benefited a lot and found a way to make up for the shortcomings of the blood spirit. Luo Li also smiled and said, "The harvest isn't bad, no wonder so many people fight to come to the land of inheritance, it really deserves its reputation." Luo Yi was outstanding as usual and smiled. "I was also pretty lucky." "Let's go to the altar of the devil's race now," Su Jin said. "Going to the altar is dangerous, you've really all decided?" Lu Mu Yen asked gravely. "Naturally." The 4 replied in unison. The plan secretly implemented by the devil race had to do with the entire Tianling continent. Since they discovered some clues, how could they stand by and watch? Lu Mu Yen noted the firm attitude of the several people and didn't try to persuade them to remain here anymore. "Then let's go." The reason why she and Ming Xiu didn't tell the pupils of the other sects was because they didn't want to sacrifice too much. Facing the superior powerhouses of the devil race, if all the pupils of the 6 sects went, they might really be completely wiped out. Jun Luochen successfully fused the split souls and his soul condensed more firmly, so there no longer posed the problem of it potentially dissipating at any time like when they first met. "Where exactly is the devil race's altar?" Lu Mu Yen telepathically asked. Although Jun Luochen's soul's cultivation base already reached sword deity, but he couldn't expose his identity as a devil race, otherwise that person would definitely use any means to eliminate this hidden danger. "Go straight on this path, it's about 5 or 6 days' journey. It'll remind you of any situation that occurs." He used a special method to hide in Lu Mu Yan's pendant, so even the holy maiden descended, she wouldn't notice. Lu Mu Yan also knew his scruples and didn't call him out to lead the way. Under Jun Luochen's guidance, they arrived at a large waterfall near the altar on the 5th day. Lu Mu Yan, who was originally observing the surroundings, suddenly revealed surprise in her eyes and her gaze moved towards the depths of the waterfall. "What's wrong?" Mo Yan was Lu Mu Yan's natal spirit pet, and felt the minor fluctuations in her soul too. Lu Mu Yan narrowed her eyes and replied, "I discovered Thunder Monarch's aura." "Thunder Monarch? He also entered the land of inheritance?" Mo Yan's indifferent gaze also revealed a look of surprise. Although Lu Muyen and Thunder Monarch were under a contract partner relationship in the competition space, but they also had a connection between the souls, so she definitely didn't feel it incorrectly. And I feel like he's very far away, yet also very close. Lu Muyen furrowed her brows and continued, should be in the depths beneath this pond under the waterfall. Is the altar of the devil race at the bottom of this pond? Mo Yen thought about it and asked. Jun Luo Chen's still looking for it. He said the entrance to the altar isn't fixed and will change with the opening of the land of inheritance. Although Lu Muyen said this, but she still considered what Mo Yen said rather accurate. She just had a feeling that the purpose of Thunder Monarch entering the land of inheritance should also be for the altar of the devil race. All the inheritance halls in the land of inheritance were only for human sword masters, and demonic beasts couldn't inherit anything at all, so it was impossible for Thunder Monarch to come in here to play around. It's not bad for us if Thunder Monarch is here. Mo Yen said. Lu Muyen nodded. The ancient contract skill I signed with him can't be broken. As long as the law of heaven and earth still exists, he can't kill me or even think about hurting me. Thunder Monarch was already at the pinnacle of Tier 9 in the competition space, and with his demonic energy suppressed for so many years, she believed he must have broken through to Tier 10 long ago, which might be of help to them. The entrance to the devil race altar is at the bottom of this waterfall. Jun Luo Chen's voice sounded timely. After hearing his words, Lu Muyen said to Ming Xiao and the others, the altar's at the bottom of this pond, let's go down. Alright. They leapt down into the pond water, each activating an elemental energy shield and utilized defensive magic tools to continuously dive deeper down. When they reached the deepest part of the bottom of the pond, they only felt a chilly air spread, but they didn't find the entrance. There's a restriction here. Ming Xiao's eyes flashed with a layer of golden light, then he pointed to a corner after checking the bottom of the pond. Lu Muyen also discovered something wrong with the fluctuations. Can you break it? If it were before, there should be nothing we can do, but after we receive the previous inheritance of the joint array, we can crack it now. Ming Xiao said with a confident smile. Lu Muyen took out her natal array compass and checked it carefully, then her lips raised to an arc. Let's start. Ming Xiao tacitly took out his own array compass and made seals with Lu Muyen to break the restriction. The four of them couldn't help but sigh when they saw the tacit understanding between the two that no one could intervene with. Whether it be looks or talent, they were indeed an excellent match. Soon, that layer of restriction was easily broken under the combined force of the two, and the several people also entered into the open passage. After the restriction was broken, the passage to the altar couldn't be closed again. An hour later, Yi Qinghan also came to this waterfall alone. A group of cyan flames in his dantian moved, and the originally ink-black hair gradually became dark blue while his black eyes also felt deep like the sea. Without hesitation, he leapt into the pond, and when he discovered that the passage with the restriction was broken, he pondered for a moment then also entered. After Yi Qinghan disappeared, Lan Si and 3 other young men appeared by the waterfall. King, Yi Qinghan really came. A man behind Lan Si said fearfully, I truly didn't expect him to have the purest bloodline of the sea race. Only those with the purest royal clan bloodline of the sea clan could birth a natal sea spirit flame. When Yi Qinghan cast the spell earlier, they felt the bloodline flame that made people's heart palpitate, as well as a sense of pressure. His father is the Northern Sea King. It's not surprising that he has the purest bloodline of the sea race. Lan Si glanced at the 3 of them and warned, although there are frictions and conflicts between us 4 sea kings, but you mustn't hurt Yi Qinghan. There were contradictions amongst their sea clan, but the premise was that they were absolutely not allowed to harm the rare royal bloodline of the 4 sea kings, so they not only would not harm Yi Qinghan, but also couldn't let any accidents happen to him. What's more, Yi Qinghan's mother was the most beloved woman by the Northern Sea King. Back then, the Northern Sea King even caused some trouble because of her when contending for the throne. Placing Yi Qinghan in the lower world with the maternal clan was also a kind of protection and trial for him. A few years ago, the Northern Sea King used thunderous means to fully secure his throne, and Yi Qinghan's mother also became the queen. The two had only him, that one son, so it was also probably time to recall him back to Guangling world. Lan Si rubbed his chin. Helping Yi Qinghan could also be considered repaying the favor he owed to the Northern Sea King in his early years. Yes. Hearing Lan Si's warning, the other 3 froze, then replied respectfully. Immediately, the 4 of them followed Ming Xiao and Lu Muyen in through the passage with the broken restriction. Entering the passage leading to the altar wasn't easy. There were numerous level 7 restrictions. If it weren't for Lu Muyen and Ming Xiao gaining a thorough understanding of the inheritance from before, it would have been difficult to break. Passing through the passage, they all entered Long Yao's internal space, and Long Yao snuck into the altar while hiding his aura. Devil Race Altar. A wave of devil force surged out from the bottom of the well and enveloped the 3 women who were sitting cross-legged as the Insha force spread throughout the altar. Young lord, is the devil force tempering finishing soon? A man who sat cross-legged on a black crystal column asked. The cyan-clothed man slowly opened his eyes. Tomorrow we will be able to perform the sacrificial ceremony, so you should all prepare first. Yes. The other 8 nodded when they heard his words. Long Yao was a late-phase Tier 10 demonic beast and had the bloodline of the primordial void dragon king, so as long as there was no sword deity stage cultivators or demonic beasts above Tier 10, then no one would be able to discover his aura. Lu Muyen and the others could spy on the outside situation in his internal space. Should we act first so that they can't perform the descending of the split soul ceremony? Su Jin asked gravely. Ming Xiu replied, the 9 of them are all advanced phase and peak phase sword deities. If, not only will we not be able to destroy their plan, but we may even be caught by the other party and have our elemental essence absorbed. Hearing Ming Xiu's words, everyone except Lu Muyen was stunned. 9 advanced phase and peak phase sword deities? I can tell that 2 of them used a possession skill, but how did the other 7 get in? Su Jin asked in surprise. He couldn't detect the cultivation base of the 9 people before them. He originally thought that the other party was just using some kind of secret skill to cover themselves up, but he didn't expect they were all sword deity powerhouses of advanced phase and peak phase. This truly was tricky. Lu Muyen said, Senior brothers, have you discovered that after entering this altar, the binding force of the land of inheritance on us is so weak that it can be ignored? Only then did the others realize that the power that was previously suppressing them was pretty much useless now. They should have used a secret skill to suppress their cultivation base to enter here. After arriving at the altar, they dispelled their secret skill. Lu Mubai said. Then what are we going to do now? Luo Li asked with furrowed brows. He wasn't afraid of death, but it was difficult to implement the plan of destroying the other party's schemes with just their strength. When they start the sacrificial ceremony and when the devil race's split souls descend, these 9 people will also spend a lot of elemental essence and elemental energy on the ceremony. By then, that's when we'll act. Ming Xiu said slowly. Luo Li pursed his lips and said, why do people from the devil race know so many secret skills? If the sword deities of our 6 sects could have such secret skills, then that'd be great. The devil race is a ruler an entire realm in the upper world, so their foundations and secrets definitely shouldn't be underestimated. Lu Muyen said, compared to Tianling continent where we're located, we're just the tip of the iceberg, so we couldn't compare in terms of secret skills either. Luo Li sighed, true. I really wonder what they want to do on our Tianling continent to go through such labor. In fact, Luo Li's question was also the mystery in everyone else's minds. There were so many lower interfaces, and Tianling continent was only at around middle lower level. Even if someone wanted to plunder resources, they should go to the lower interfaces with richer resources. There must be more behind the devil race coming to Tianling continent and going through such painstaking efforts. What they want might be the abyss below the cliff at Falling Ghost River. After a while, Ming Xiu said. Lu Muyan's eyes flashed with clarity, and she narrowed her eyes with a smile. The abyss beneath the Falling Ghost River is filled with Insha force, and there are often devil race people wandering around there. There must really be some treasure there. The others couldn't help but hold their forehead when they saw her narrowing her eyes and scheming for those treasures. Lu Mubai stroked her nose in amusement and said, your eyes light up whenever you hear that there's any treasures. If that place is really being coveted by the devil race, it's definitely not a good place and the danger there is definitely greater than in the land of inheritance. Don't be thinking about it. Compared to the safety of his little sister, treasures were all meaningless. I know, big brother, I still value my own little life very much. Lu Muyen rubbed her nose and smiled, but if we can destroy the devil race's plan and also snatch the treasures they're coveting, such a thing of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, if we don't go to hell for it, who will? It's not necessarily treasures. Su Jin said with a smile. There must be treasures in the abyss of Falling Ghost River. My 6th sense won't be wrong. Lu Muyen said confidentially. Muyen, count me in for finding treasures. Luo Li said with a smile. Lu Muyen liked treasures, so he would accompany her to find it. Danger and whatever, he wasn't afraid. Lu Muyen cast a look to Luo Li as if to say he indeed had good eyes, as expected, little wild cat has experience. The others lowered their heads and chuckled. Luo Li was obviously just following along without any thoughts. By the way, big brother, the matter between you and second brother might only be doable if we go to the abyss below the cliff of the Falling Ghost River. Lu Muyen looked at Lu Mubai and said. She had told Lu Mubai before regarding the fact that he and her second brother's constitutions could be swapped. He also agreed to it, and according to Mo Yen, the place where the secret skill could be performed required strong Insha force. Then only Insha cliff at Falling Ghost River could meet the conditions, so she wondered if everything was destined. She just felt like there was something there that she should be looking for. I'll accompany you to explore when the time comes. Lu Mubai knew that it was difficult for his little sister to give up on what she's interested in, so what's the harm in going crazy with her? On the altar, the cyan-clothed man asked the 9 people to start building an array. The 9 took out a dark black iron ball one after another with devil force surging within it and then tossed it casually as they chanted spells. The iron balls swirled in midair and fell to the 9 positions to form the force of 9 palaces. One after another, array imprints landed from the palms of the 9 people. Then the 9 black crystal pillars instantly lit up and an 8 trigrams pattern connected the 9 pillars into one. The side representing Yin enveloped the deep well. 9 palaces 8 trigrams array. It's a grade 7 joint array. Lu Muyen furrowed her brows. That cyan-clothed man and woman are both grade 7 array masters, and the others are being assisted with magic tools. But the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array isn't complete. The yang portion can't be used. Ming Xiu hooked his lips upwards. The real 9 palaces 8 trigrams array needs grade 8 array masters to be able to complete it. So they still had a good chance of breaking the array. Well, be able to break this array from the entrance on the yang side. Lu Muyen smiled tacitly. She and Ming Xiu had mastered a lot of arrays. If their cultivation base and strength kept up, they could also break through to grade 8 array masters. At the same time, Yi Qinghan used a treasure of the sea race to hide his aura in a corner. Lan Si and the other three cast a secret skill to fuse their auras with the altar and waited for an opportunity on the side. The devil races at the altar placed all their energy into the array and didn't discover the groups of people that were hidden at all. Advertisement. Previous chapter. The next day. The young lord of the hidden city and the other 8 people had successfully arranged the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array. Only 2 of the 9 were grade 7 array masters, and the other 7 were all grade 6 array masters, so they only arranged the Sun, Li, Kun, and Dui attribute for palaces, while the Quan, Can, Zhen, and Zhen 4 yang attributes were superficial and no power could be activated from it. As soon as the time of Z, between 11 at night to 1 in the morning, arrived, the 9 people returned to sit on the black crystal pillars and chanted some difficult spells. Wisps of elemental essence emerged from the top of the 9 people's heads and gathered in one place. The cyan-clothed man suddenly opened his eyes, and a gap appeared on his forehead. The gap gradually grew larger, like a third eye. From the gap, a demonic red light shot straight into the sky above the altar. Boom boom. There was a deafening sound over the altar and a huge vortex appeared in their field of vision. Then the cyan-clothed man took out a dark red bead and threw it. The bead was instantly sucked into the vortex. The other 8 quickly formed seals and their elemental essence also automatically entered the vortex. 2 hours later, the 3 women in the deep well were lifted by the cyan-clothed man and fell onto the 9 black crystal pillars that were at the center of the vortex. Lu Muyan's pupils constricted as the surrounding devil force gradually dissipated, revealing their true faces. Yenner, what's wrong? Ming Xiu turned to ask when he saw Lu Muyan's expression change. Lu Muyan narrowed her eyes. Among those 3 women, I recognize 2. One is Gu Yan who has a grudge against me, and the other is Mu Ning who my elder cousin brother, Ling Fei Yang, likes. Lu Mubai had also seen Mu Ning in the competition space of the Tianling Continental Tournament for hegemony. He furrowed his brows and asked, didn't Mu Ning go to a sect? How did she become a medium and vessel like Gu Yan for the descent of the devil race superior's split soul? She's also a full-in body type. I think she was kidnapped here. Ming Xiu said gravely. If Mu Ning really was someone Ling Fei Yang liked, then it would be trickier to deal with. Junior sister, should we save this Mu Ning? Su Jin also thought of what Ming Xiu did. Lu Muyan pressed her lips tightly together, then said without hesitation, save. Elder cousin brother and her are truly in love. Although they aren't married, but she's already my elder cousin sister-in-law. What she said was also expected by the others, NOVL. Lu Muyan's temperament was actually apathetic, but she never treated people she valued unfairly. With Mu Ning and Ling Fei Yang's relationship, she definitely wouldn't stand by and do nothing. There'll be some time required for fusion. Well, act then and your elder cousin sister-in-law can be saved. Ming Xiu unconditionally supported Lu Muyan's decision. Lu Muyan clenched her fists. No matter what, she couldn't let anything happen to Mu Ning. Towards this woman, she still had a good impression. Suddenly, 3 beams of white light fell from the vortexes above the 9 black pillars. Once they entered the altar, the 3 beams of white light penetrated into the bodies of the 3 women at lightning speed. The 3 of them groaned with pained expressions. The 9 people led by the man in cyan clothes immediately activated the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array. The 4 palaces of Sun, Li, Kun, and Dui attributes were immediately activated and the Insha force in the deep well was also quickly sucked up and passed into the bodies of the 3 of them through the array. In an instant, the 3 of them were enveloped by a thick layer of frosty dark fog. Lu Muyan could see that except for Gu Yanran, who naturally accepted the split soul of the high-level devil race, the other 2 women were slightly resistant. Well, start after another incense stick of time. Yenner and I will join forces to break the array. You will all restrain the 9 people who haven't yet completed the ritual. Ming Xiu said to Su Jin and the others. All right. Long Yao, Bing Ji, you 2 assist the 4 of them. Then he instructed the dragon and the bird. In the face of major events, the stupid dragon and stinky bird who fought very day were relatively united. After an incense stick of time, Long Yao sent the several people out from the space in his body. Without any hesitation, Ming Xiu and Lu Muyan took out their natal array compasses and flew towards the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array. 1 gold and 1 black flag unfolded and a golden dragon and purple gold qilin emerged from between the brows of the 2, attacking the Qian, Can, Zhen, and Zhen 4 yang palace locations. The 9 people, including the cyan-clothed man, were stunned when they saw Lu Muyan who had suddenly appeared, and their faces darkened instantly. But right now, they were at a critical moment, and they couldn't spare any hands to kill them quickly with all their strength. Quick, stop them from breaking the array. The cyan-clothed man shouted to the 8 people when he saw Lu Muyan and Ming Xiu's 2 array flags and spirit flames attacking the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array's Yang palace places. The Yang palace was the biggest weakness of their 9 palaces 8 trigrams array. If it were breached, the entire array would automatically collapse and disintegrate. The other 8 people sacrificed their magic tools to attack the array flags and spirit flames. Your opponents are us. Su Jin and the others fell in 4 positions and used their strongest moves to defend. The 8 people snorted, then split a part of their focus to control the magic tools to attack. Long Yao and Bing Ji didn't show up immediately. They hid themselves, and each time the attacks of the 8 people landed in front of Su Jin and the others, the space would be distorted for a short time and the power of the attack would be reduced by half. Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu kept forming seals to insert into the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array at first, then each took out a golden longsword, channeled their elemental energy into it and slashed towards a young palace position. The array fluctuated instantly and there was even a crack on the light cover. The cyan-clothed man narrowed his eyes, and there was viciousness in them. Suddenly, a figure fell behind Lu Muyen who was breaking the array with all her mind, and a palm wind with the strength of a sword deity fell. The figure came too fast, and the palm wind seemed to have been brewing for a long time, which caught Lu Muyen and the others by surprise. However, although they were caught off guard, they were well prepared. Ming Xiu sacrificed a defensive magic tool, but before his magic tool, another black figure suddenly appeared, facing that palm wind. Boom! The two made an explosive sound and the palm wind dissipated. The figures of both revealed themselves. One was in the appearance of the cyan-clothed man, which should be the second incarnation he cultivated, and its strength was only at initial phase sword deity. While the other was Yi Qing Han, with dark blue hair, wearing black patterned clothes and a cold expression on his face. Qing Han. Lu Muyen didn't expect Yi Qing Han to appear here. Yi Qing Han turned his head, and the coldness in his eyes melted a lot as an arc overflowed on his lips. Muyen. Ming Xiu narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Yi Qing Han, this love rival sure came at the right time. Humph, your sea race really came too. The cyan-clothed man's eyes were filled with viciousness. Yi Qing Han glanced at him lightly, so what? Lan Si and the others didn't act immediately but continued to hide and wait for an opportunity. That's perfect, since you're here, then you don't have to return. An eerie arc rose on the lips of the cyan-clothed man. As soon as his voice fell, the surrounding space suddenly began to fluctuate. Note, for those who forgot, Ling Fei Yang is LMY's cousin from her mother's side who used to be in a wheelchair due to a curse of some sort, I think, or poison, something like that. The young lord of the hidden city smiled eerily, then the surrounding space fluctuated. From under the 9 black crystal pillars, more than a dozen gigantic, nether beasts with grim, frosty scales all over their bodies suddenly climbed out, all at peak phase tier 9. More than a dozen nether beasts stared with their big green eyes as big as buckets and attacked Su Jin and the others in unison. Long Yao and Bing Ji no longer hid when they saw it and immediately revealed their figures, greeting the enemy with the 4 of them. Ming Xiu and Lu Muyen kept bombarding the Yang Palace weakness of the array. As soon as the nether beasts approached the 2 of them, Mo Yen suddenly grew larger, and a cloud of cyan nether flames spewed out. Meanwhile, the second incarnation of the cyan-clothed man fought with the Yi Qing Han. With a thought from Yi Qing Han, 3 more spirit pets appeared around him. Among them, the Golden Eagle King had advanced to peak phase tier 9, while the other 2 were sea beasts that Lu Muyen had never seen before, both of which were tier 10 cultivation bases. Boom boom. Not long after, a crack suddenly appeared in the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array, emitting several loud noises, and began to collapse from the Yang Palace. Pu. The 9 people headed by the cyan-clothed man spat out a mouthful of blood and their aura weakened greatly. Damn you. The cyan-clothed man had a ferocious look on his face. With a tap of his toes, he fell in front of the 2 of them and struck with his palm. Ming Xiu huffed coldly and greeted him with a palm. After the palms met, they both took a few steps back. You actually have the strength to fight me. The cyan-clothed man narrowed his eyes and looked at Ming Xiu dangerously, asking, just who are you? You can find the answer to this question in hell. Ming Xiu held a scarlet longsword in his other hand and waved it at the cyan-clothed man. Right now, the other 8 people weren't idle either and they attacked one after another. Among them, the only female sword deity attacked with her palm towards Lu Muyen's head. N/O/vel/B/in.C/in.C/om. Lu Muyen sneered and with a step she disappeared in a few afterimages. The palm strike also landed on the ground. She wasn't the sword venerable who had just entered the land of inheritance anymore. After advancing to advanced phase sword saint, she now already possessed the ability to fight against a sword deity. Lu Mubai and the others could deal with the tier 9 nether beasts, but after the other 8 sword deities entered the battle, they were obviously inferior. It was only thanks to Long Yao's spatial skill supporting them that they weren't seriously injured. Su Jin did have the strength to fight a sword deity, but even if the 8 had lost their elemental essence and elemental energy, they were still late-phase sword deities, so they still struggled after being besieged. Seeing that Lu Mubai and the others were about to be overwhelmed, Yi Qing Han instructed the 3 spirit pets to help. Above the altar, there was chaos. And after the 9 palaces 8 trigrams array was broken by Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu, the devil force around the 3 people in the center of the 9 black crystal pillars gradually decreased. The Insha devil force in the deep well also stopped transporting outwards with the stop of the array. In a hidden corner, someone beside Lan Si asked telepathically, King, are we going to help? Right now, the Holy Maiden and the Holy Messenger's split souls had yet to merge with the Threat was the perfect time to kill them. No need for now, the Holy Maiden's split soul will be merged soon. After she succeeds, well kill them. Lan Si sneered. King, won't it take a lot of effort to kill her after her fusion is successful? Someone asked inexplicably. Lan Si raised an eyebrow and said, the fusion hasn't yet been completed. Her split soul isn't marked with the imprint of this interface yet. Even if we kill her now, it won't hurt her foundations much. But after the fusion is completed and the aura of Tianling continent is imprinted, her original body will suffer a lot of backlash as soon as her split soul's destroyed. He paused, then added. King is wise. Ming Xiu and Lu Mu Yen didn't rush to attack Gu Yan Ran and the two, having the same idea as Lan Si. As soon as the 9 palaces' 8 trigrams array was broken, the devil force that the Yin palace was transferring into them also disappeared. Their soul fusion would also be weak for a period of time, so it would be best to act then. Within the area, there were traces of the chaotic battles everywhere, and soon, more than a dozen Yin nether beasts were all burnt to death by Mo Yan's netherworld flame. Of course, the elemental essence and soul energy of the Yin nether beasts were also secretly extracted by him and would be tossed to Jun Luo Chen later. After an incense stick of time, Gu Yan Ran abruptly opened her eyes and made several complicated hand seals in front of her chest. The vortex in the sky turned into a beam of light and entered her body. Her cultivation base soared from the initial Sword King, quickly advancing to peak phase Sword Deity. Because Lu Mu Yen destroyed her Dantian, she couldn't gather and absorb spiritual force and her cultivation base had been stagnant. After the devil race of the hidden city repaired her Dantian, they sealed it, not allowing her to absorb the motley spiritual force and affect the descent of the Holy Maiden's split soul. Gu Yan Ran casually glanced at the 2 women who were still merging beside her, stood up, and looked at Lu Mu Yen, her beautiful face with a never-before-seen devilishness. Lu Mu Yen, do you still remember the owner of my body? Hearing her words, the 9 sword deities headed by the man in cyan clothes immediately ended the battle and knelt down towards Gu Yan Ran, saying respectfully, "Greetings to Holy Maiden." "Stand." Gu Yan Ran said lightly without the slightest warmth in her eyes. Lu Mu Yen raised her eyes and looked at Gu Yan Ran indifferently, saying, "Of course I remember. A trash whose Dantian I destroyed, how big of a wave can you create?" Gu Yan Ran's face suddenly turned ferocious, then her eyes grew extremely cold, and she muttered to herself, "You actually want to regain the initiative of this body? Not knowing your own strength, it seems I can't leave you." Then a wisp of cyan smoke emerged from above Gu Yan Ran's body and the Holy Maiden said, "Leave peacefully. Your hatred, Bengong One will avenge." She tapped her fingertips lightly. A cluster of yellow flames flew out and instantly engulfed Gu Yan Ran's soul. Lu Mu Yen narrowed her eyes. As she guessed, Gu Yan Ran accepted the loss of her body so calmly, but in fact, she wanted to regain control when the Holy Maiden's soul was weak. It was just a pity that the Holy Maiden of the devil race wasn't some mediocre person. Lu Mu Yen purposely angered Gu Yan Ran to make her resist. The Holy Maiden would naturally not keep such a soul that could counter-devour any time in her body. And right now, the indescribable feeling in Lu Mu Yan's heart also disappeared with the destruction of Gu Yan Ran's soul. If Gu Yan Ran's soul wasn't destroyed today, she just felt that something unexpected would happen in the future. Fortunately, the Holy Maiden was as sinister and arrogant as she had guessed and didn't allow anyone to resist at all. After Gu Yan Ran's soul disappeared, the Holy Maiden immediately took full control of her body. She swept her gaze over Lu Mu Yen and the others and said, "Although this body is a little weak, but it's more than enough to deal with you lot." When her eyes swept over Ming Xiu, her icy pupils constricted inadvertently. "Are you from the Ming Palace Imperial family?" Lan Si, who was hiding on the side, heard the 4 words Ming Palace Imperial family and suddenly a hint of clarity rose in his eyes. No wonder Ming Xiu always gave him a sense of familiarity. So it turned out that he was from the Ming Palace Imperial family of Guangling World. If Ming Xiu was a member of the Ming Palace Imperial family, then it was explainable if he didn't have the aura of a projected avatar or the descent of a split soul, because he must have been sent to Tianling continent since he was a child. "You even discovered this." Ming Xiu gave a meaningful smile. The Holy Maiden was in a trance for a moment, then said something, as if in nostalgia and resentment, "You truly look alike." She restrained all her emotions, her eyes regaining an icy chill, and the corners of her lips curled up. "He must also want you dead." A form of self-address. "He must also want you dead." The words of the Holy Maiden didn't make Ming Xiu's expressions change. His expression was still indifferent, and his eyes were calm without the slightest fluctuation. "Is that so? Whether he wants me dead or not, I truly don't know." An arc of ridicule rose on Ming Xiu's lips, and he said lightly, "But I know that you've been stalking him, desiring but unable to obtain, and in the end, after he cruelly abandoned you, you became the Holy Maiden of the devil race." Although he was still young at the time, but he still heard some rumors about this woman and that person. The face of the Holy Maiden changed instantly, revealing a more sinister feeling than Gu Yan Ran earlier, her voice cold. "Shut up." No one dared to mention that man in front of her for so many years, and she had been deliberately trying to forget him. But unexpectedly, he was suddenly mentioned by Ming Xiu today. It seems the pain and hatred in her heart still couldn't be erased. She was originally chosen by the devil race to be raised as the Holy Maiden since she was a child. If it weren't because she fell in love with that man, she wouldn't have become a laughingstock later on. Even now that her cultivation base had grown tremendously through her experiences and fortuitous opportunities, and she had become the Holy Maiden in the devil race, except for the Devil Lord and the several other evenly matched Holy Sons and Holy Maidens, others dared not disrespect her. But the unbearable past in her private life still made many people mock her secretly. She scoffed at herself. Even if this was just a split soul, but the throbbing, heart-piercing feeling still rose. She had deep-rooted love for that man, and maybe she would never be able to get rid of this heart demon in her life. So she must obtain him again, and only then could her state of mind be relieved. "Ming Xiu, you will eventually return to Guangling World. Why don't we work together?" The Holy Maiden gathered her emotions and regained her composure, looking at him with a smile as she suggested. Even though the person in front of her only looked around 40 to 50% the same, but she still couldn't resist taking a few more glances. "Do you think I'd be stupid enough to cooperate with a shameless woman like you?" Ming Xiu had blatant disdain in his eyes. His voice was like 10,000-year ice, and exceptionally domineering. "Don't involve me in the matter between you and him. You better put away that disgusting gaze of yours immediately, otherwise this highness will want to gouge your eyes out." He had heard that after this woman was toyed with then discarded and became the devil race's holy maiden, she raised a lot of gigolos, that looked even remotely similar to that person, to play with. He felt very disgusted when watching her see that person through him. The hatred in the holy maiden's eyes were filled to the brim. That person used to look at her with that gaze as if looking at something dirty. Just why? How was she not fit for this one and that one to all belittle her like this? Since that's the case, then go die. The holy maiden's voice was filled with a sinister viciousness. She was going to draw out Ming Xiu's soul to return to Guangling world and see if that man would be happy or furious about it. There was an eerie smile on her face. She even felt so impatient, oh what to do. She didn't expect that by accepting the mission of occupying Tianling continent, there would be such a huge harvest. Ming Xiu must be from the main bloodline of the Ming Palace Imperial. Seeing Gu Yanran's face constantly changing, Lu Mu. After extracting his soul and refining it, what sort of face and expression would those decrepit old things from the Ming Palace, who looked down on her, reveal? Seeing Gu Yanran's face constantly changing, Lu Mu Yan only felt that this woman was definitely a huge mentally ill psychopath. Kill them all, extract their souls and refine them. Then she gave orders to the cyan-clothed man and the other 8, as ordered by the holy maiden. Although the several people were also feeling as if their scalps tingled from beneath her venomous serpent-like gaze, but they didn't dare disobey her order. Immediately, the holy maiden vanished, and when she reappeared, a pair of pale hands with a trace of death stretched out behind Ming Xiu. But before her hand could land, the space suddenly distorted, and a cold-faced man in purple stood in front of Ming Xiu and blocked the frosty in aura palm wind. You stinky bitch is disgusting. You've got the smell of corpses all over you. Just how many people have you killed and how much death force did you absorb? Long Yao covered his nose in disgust. This holy maiden was just a wisp of split soul, but the corpse aura was so strong already. If it were the original body, then what'd that be like? With this sort of aura, the people who died in her hands could definitely pile to numerous mountain peaks. The holy maiden snorted coldly, opened her mouth, and a cloud of black mist spewed out. Everyone watched 4 peak phase tier 10 Yin soul beasts emerge from the black fog immediately, their big green eyes staring greedily at Long Yao and Bing Ji. If the souls of these 2 divine beasts could be refined and absorbed, then their bodies would be able to break through again. But because of the suppressive power of this interface, they suddenly became peak phase tier 10, and they were a little unaccustomed. Fuck, you've got even more disgusting things. Long Yao stepped back and hurriedly activated a shield using his demonic energy. Bing Ji also had a look of cautiousness and fear. Those 4 nether beasts were completely different from the ones released by the cyan-clothed man before, and the difference wasn't small. These 4 nether beasts gave him heart palpitations of danger. Lu Mu Yan's eyes narrowed. It seemed that it would be a fierce battle today. Long Yao, put my eldest brother, senior brother and Luo clan brothers in your inner space. She telepathically said to Stupid Dragon. This was a battle between sword deities. Her eldest brother and the Luo clan brothers could no longer participate in this battle. If they didn't escape, then if they were affected, they may even be seriously injured or lose their life. Su Jin had the strength to battle a sword deity, but none here were initial phase sword deities, and it would be much safer to enter Long Yao's body. They really underestimated the preparations of the devil race this time. This psychopathic holy maiden's status and strength must also be pretty high in Guangling world. Fortunately, since being oppressed by the sword deity until she wasn't able to fight back last time, she no longer suppressed her cultivation base. With her current strength, she would be able to use several life-saving means against even peak phase sword deity devil races. If she cooperated with Mo Yen, she could even kill any one of the 8 sword deities beside the cyan-clothed man. When Long Yao heard Lu Mu Yan's telepathic words, with a thought, Su Jin and the others disappeared in thin air. After returning to Long Yao's internal body space, Su Jin and the others smiled bitterly. They didn't expect that they would also drag people back one day. Improving their strength, they only had these words in their hearts right now. This incident also inspired the 4 of them to devote themselves to more arduous cultivation in the days to come, but this was all in the future. Outside, the Holy Maiden plus the Een Soul Beast and the 9 sword deity powerhouses from the hidden city all rushed to attack them. Thunder Monarch, how long are you going to wait before showing up? Lu Mu Yen looked towards the corner of an altar with her peripheral vision. Their strength was indeed good, but they were still inferior in numbers compared to the other, so she naturally had to at least drag Thunder Monarch into the water together. Yi Qing Han's eyes also swept over a corner and said coldly, Lan Si, when are you all going to stop watching? Everyone was stunned when they heard Lu Mu Yen and Yi Qing Han's words. Ming Xiu was slightly surprised when Lu Mu Yen said the words Thunder Monarch, but he wasn't surprised when Yi Qing Han called out Lan Si. He had known for a while that there was still a wave of people hiding here. After all, he had come into contact with Lan Si before, so as soon as the other party appeared at the altar, he discovered their aura. But he didn't feel that Thunder Monarch that Lu Mu Yen spoke of. The other party must have used some secret skill to hide his aura. The Holy Maiden furrowed her brows slightly. She had only just merged with this body and was still in a weak state, plus there were the interface restrictions here, and her senses were also limited, so she didn't discover the existence of the other people either. The 9 people with the hidden city's young lord were obviously also surprised. Just what was happening today? So many people hid to watch their sacrificial ceremony, but they didn't discover a single one of them. Immediately, everyone saw a man in cyan brocade clothes with sharp facial features, deep outlines, and a bit of a feminine feel, but not one would think was a woman walk out of the space like taking a leisurely stroll. He had a temperament that combined a coldness and laziness, but there was no sense of contradiction, and instead, it gave people the feeling that this person should just be like this someone who could be as cold and indifferent as the icy mountains, or as lazy as the most noble Persian cat. His peach blossom-shaped eyes narrowed as he raised an eyebrow and said with some unique style, "Woman, you sure calculated well." From his tone, there was obviously some dissatisfaction with Lu Muyen. He hid this long because he didn't want to battle, but who knew that this cunning woman would actually dare use him? Most importantly was that there was a contractual relationship between him and her. He knew this ancient contract skill created an equal relationship, but it was still dominated by the human side. But he wasn't too annoyed. After all, if it weren't for Lu Muyen, he would still be bound in that competition space and he didn't know how many years it'd take before he would be able to come out. There was even no chance of returning to Guangling World. "Do you still remember what you promised me?" Lu Muyen ignored his dissatisfaction and asked with a half-smile. "Just tell me what requirements you have." Thunder Monarch replied without a good attitude. Lu Muyen raised an eyebrow, then pointed at the 4 peak phase tier 10 nether beasts that were being dealt with by Bing Ji and the spirit pets, saying, "They'll be handed over to you. Remember to keep their soul essences, this can be considered the first thing I request of you." Back then in the competition space, in addition to giving her the lightning ball that combined all the powers of the lightning outside the Thunder Palace, Thunder Monarch also promised to do 3 things for her. She originally didn't want to waste it, but right now, she was at a critical juncture, so she could only squeeze this fellow, Thunder Monarch, dry as much as possible. What a waste to not use it. Thunder Monarch's peach blossom eyes were half closed, then took a breath, and said as if gritting his teeth, "All right." This woman really dared to make a request to him, having him deal with the 4 peak phase tier 10 soul beasts. That aside, she even wanted him to keep the soul essences of the soul beasts, truly a good scheme. But he did indeed have the ability to do it, so the request she made still met their agreement. He had no choice but to do it. "Very good, then go." Lu Muyen chuckled and nodded. Thunder Monarch's expression stiffened, and the corner of his lips twitched. Then Gao Hat did she think of him as? With a flash, the Thunder Monarch reluctantly landed in front of the 4 soul beasts, and with a raise of his hand, lightning bolts swept out of his palm and fiercely struck the horns atop the soul beasts. Bing Ji and Yi Qing Han's 3 spirit pets were able to escape and quickly greeted the 3 human sword deities. Yi Qing Han's opponent was the young lord of the hidden city and his second incarnation. Although Yi Qing Han's cultivation base was only at peak phase sword saint, but he wasn't inferior to the young lord of the hidden city at all. The natal sea spirit flame within him was also very powerful. In addition, with the treasures of the sea race, he even gradually started to gain the upper hand. Ming Xiao and the Holy Maiden immediately fought each other, clearly also dealing with it easily as his soul wasn't extracted and refined by the other party immediately. Lu Muyen was besieged by 3 sword deities. She and Mo Yen used the secret skill and were also evenly matched. At this time, the other 2 women sitting cross-legged on the altar also opened their eyes, obviously also having finished merging. Although their souls were unstable, but they had the ability to battle. Like the Holy Maiden, they sucked an energy from the space in the vortex and their cultivation base soared to peak phase sword deity. Disregarding the disadvantage that their split soul energy was still weakened, they immediately entered the battle. "Lan Si, how long are you going to watch the show for?" Seeing the merging of the 2 holy messengers finish, Lu Muyen narrowed her eyes. That dark-hearted and sinister, innocent faking Lan Si wanted to be that Oriole behind everyone and pick up all the benefits, but he also needed to ask her whether she'd allow it. Then with a flick of her finger, a cluster of orange flames attacked a corner, and the 4 figures, including Lan Si, emerged immediately. TSK, little Yenner, as long as you say the word, it'll naturally do anything for you, why be so violent?" Lan Si wasn't angry at Lu Muyen attacking, and there was a somewhat cynical smile on his face. Ming Xiao and Yi Qing Han's expressions darkened when they saw that sort of appearance, but they didn't say anything. Now wasn't the time to be jealous. Lu Muyen looked askance at him and said with a sneer, "What, you're not going to pretend you're that gentle like Jade gentleman anymore? Hurry up and fight." As she spoke, she was still fighting endlessly with the 3 sword deities. Seeing the appearance of the people from the sea race, one of the people fighting her was distracted, and she seized this opportunity, moving her fingers. Several golden needles as thin as hair activated instantly and the man was struck when he didn't pay attention. When he found that his body had been pierced a few times, the person's expression changed greatly, and it was too late to mobilize his elemental energy to force the golden needles out. Lu Muyen's golden needles were tempered with extreme frost golden essence and various types of poison. Once it entered the body, as long as one didn't exceed the existence of sword deity, they would become temporarily paralyzed. The elemental energy in his body felt as if it were sealed and couldn't be activated as his body numbed. It was also in these few breaths of time when strips of golden vines emerged from the ground and instantly dragged the person underground. As long as the blood essences of the sword deities of the devil race here were absorbed and refined, Shue could also break through to tier 10. Lan Si smiled meaningfully as he watched Lu Muyen easily kill a late-phase sword deity devil race, although this man had spent a lot of elemental essence and elemental energy earlier. "I'm not a righteous gentleman to begin with. Since little Yenner instructed, then he'll naturally act. Kill all the devil race." Lan Si casually instructed the 3 beside him. "Yes, King." The 3 also used the secret skill of the sea race to hide their cultivation bases. After hearing Lan Si's order, they immediately greeted the enemies and personally obstructed the 2 devil race holy messengers' split souls. "Lan Si, don't hurt that white-clothed holy messenger." Lu Muyen thought about it, then telepathically spoke to Lan Si. Lan Si chuckled and replied telepathically, "Then how will you repay me? I owe you a favor, but you must force out that holy messenger's split soul and ensure the white-clothed woman is perfectly safe." "All right." I'd be more than happy to make little Yenner owe me a favor. After Lan Si finished speaking, he personally greeted the holy messenger possessing Mu Ning. With the addition of Thunder Monarch, and Lan Si and the others, the burden on Lu Mu Yen and her party was significantly reduced. Long Yao and Bing Ji roamed around the various battles while playing dirty from time to time, with space often distorted. The two who fought against Lu Mu Yen were also killed directly by the one dragon and one bird who assisted her, then finally entered Xue Xue's stomach. Although the 4 nether beasts were at peak phase tier 10, but they were a lot more inferior to the peak phase tier 10 Thunder Monarch, and it was obvious that his lightning was also the nemesis of the demonic beasts formed by Yin Sha Aura. Thunder Monarch quickly dealt with the 4 nether beasts and tossed the 4 masses of dark fog that were as large as a fingernail to Lu Mu Yen. "I finished the first thing." Thunder Monarch paused, then didn't give Lu Mu Yen a chance to order the second thing, instantly leaping into the deep well where Gu Yen ran, and the two had infused the devil force into their bodies. His voice echoed in Lu Mu Yan's ears. "I still have something to do, so I won't be staying." Seeing Thunder Monarch disappear, Lu Mu Yen furrowed her brows and asked him, "Oh Yen, what's Thunder Monarch trying to do? Could it be that there's some treasure hidden at the bottom of this dark well? Below is a storage place for devil force of the devil race's altar. After thousands of years of accumulation, there may be devil crystals forming below. He should be heading for those things." Mo Yen replied. Lu Mu Yen thought for a bit, then asked, "What ray devil crystals? What's it used for?" "The things that Thunder Monarch desperately searched for must be extraordinary." She was considering whether she'd go have a share of the porridge. Mo Yen knew what Lu Mu Yen was thinking when he saw her appearance and rolled his eyes at her in amusement. Devil crystals have the effect of tempering the Yaofu of thunder attribute demonic beasts, especially for someone like Thunder Monarch who's from a mutant royal race bloodline. It could induce a second evolution, so it's very useful to him. "Then it's not useful for you lot?" Lu Mu Yen pierced her sword through the second incarnation of the young lord of the hidden city who was battling Yi Qing Han while saying, "If it's useful to you lot, then let's go get some too. Either way, Thunder Monarch doesn't dare do anything to me." Mo Yen listened to her words that sounded like a rogue, and who knew why, but his long frozen heart was warmed. "It's not very useful, just let him this time." Thunder Monarch and Lu Mu Yen were in a contractual relationship. Maybe they'd still have situations to use that abnormal monster in the future. So naturally, the stronger Thunder Monarch was, the better. Either way, because of the constraints of the contract, it was impossible for them to become enemies. If that's the case, then he'll let him benefit this time. Lu Mu Yen shrugged with some pity in her eyes. "Lu Mu Yen, you actually killed my second incarnation." The young lord of the hidden city didn't think that Lu Mu Yen would sneak attack from behind at all. Seeing that his second incarnation was dragged away by the golden vines from underground, his expression was distorted. "You're seeking death. I killed it, so what are you so excited for?" Lu Mu Yen waved her blue longsword to meet the attack of the young lord of the hidden city. "I'm just imitating your hidden cit's actions." The killers of the hidden city were all shameless. Every time there was an assassination attempt, it was a sneak attack. If they could do it first, then she could do it too. Her uprightness also depended on people. She wouldn't be soft-hearted and feel uneasy if she schemed against enemies. The young lord of the hidden city was furious and tried his best to kill Lu Mu Yen, but was blocked by Yi Qing Han. Then Lu Mu Yen and Yi Qing Han joined forces to force the young lord of the hidden city into a very embarrassing situation. Lu Mu Yen swept the battle on Ming Xiu's side. It was basically a draw, so she quickened her movements. What she wanted was to clean up the people around her, then kill the holy maiden of the devil race together. Soon, Lan Si's subordinates and Yi Qing Han's spirit pets killed all the remaining human sword deities, and as usual, they all entered Xue Xue's mouth. After freeing themselves up, the several people and spirit pets joined the battle party that surrounded the holy maiden, young lord of the hidden city, and the two holy messengers. This time, Lan Si had obviously unsealed all the seals in his body, revealing his peak phase sword deity cultivation base. The holy messenger remained on the inferior side. His original body was of the southern sea king of the sea realm. He was injured by Ming Xiu last time because he was completely unprepared and didn't use his true strength. This time, he came prepared, so it was naturally impossible for him to be unable to deal with even the split soul of a holy messenger. With a strike of his palm, Mu Ning's body retreated step by step and a mouthful of blood spurted out. If it weren't for Lu Mu Yen entrusting him the task, Mu Ning, who was possessed by the holy messenger, would already be a corpse. He narrowed his eyes and a blue light flashed in them. The holy messenger who possessed Mu Ning suddenly felt as if her soul was being burned and immediately held her head in pain. Lan Si took the opportunity to gesture a few times in midair with his hands, and a complicated rune emerged from his palm, entering Mu Ning's sea of consciousness. The rune quickly found a cloud of red mist hidden in Mu Ning's sea of consciousness, then turned into a huge net to envelope it and forcibly dragged it out of Mu Ning's body. Just when he was about to kill the red mist with the spirit flame, a sudden change occurred. One saw that the red mist, which was originally enveloped by the big rune net, suddenly let out a sharp cry, then turned into a wisp of red smoke, breaking free from the nest and entering Lu Mu Yan's body, catching everyone completely unprepared. The holy messenger's split souls act was beyond everyone's expectations. Yenner/Mu Yen/owner. Ming Xiu, Yi Qing Han, and Bing Jis' anxious voice sounded in unison. Lu Mu Yen was taken advantage of by the holy messenger completely unprepared. She didn't expect that she would be possessed. However, her mental energy had reached the limit of this interface. If it weren't for the suppression of this interface's laws, it would be even more powerful. Her soul energy was also much stronger than that of many peerless geniuses. In addition, after obtaining the soul skill inheritance in that hall, she wasn't worried that she would be taken over by the holy messenger of the devil race. But it wouldn't be easy to counter-devour and refine or expel it. Just as Ming Xiao and the others were anxious, and when Lu Mu Yen was about to use her spirit flame after seeing that the holy messenger began to invade her sea of consciousness, wanting to take the initiative to control her body, another white light suddenly flew out from Mu Ning's body and also entered her body. What's going on? Why did Mu Ning's soul energy also enter Owner's body? Bing Ji tugged Long Yao anxiously and asked, does she want to possess Owner's body too? Long Yao rolled his eyes at him, you ask me, who do I ask? But the worry in his heart didn't diminish either. If something happened to this woman, Ming Xiao would definitely go berserk. Ming Xiao's eyes were filled with frost. He narrowed his phoenix-shaped eyes. As he dealt with the Holy Maiden's attacks, he also locked onto Lu Mu Yen. But the Holy Messenger's split soul and Mu Ning's main soul entered Lu Mu Yan's sea of consciousness together. He couldn't interfere it at all. As his thoughts kept running, he remained secretly vigilant. As long as Lu Mu Yen revealed any abnormality, then he would use a secret skill to force his soul out of his body to fight. Lan Si, you can't even handle this properly, I really don't know how you're the Southern Sea King. Yi Qinghan glanced at Lan Si coldly and said with mockery. In his heart, he wanted to tear Lan Si into thousands of pieces, and even wondered if Lan Si was deliberately trying to put Lu Mu Yen in danger. He had a lot of means now, but he couldn't do anything about the devil race's split soul infiltrating Lu Mu Yan's body. This feeling of powerlessness made him very irritable. Lan Si touched his nose, and there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. I was careless. He didn't expect that the Holy Messenger's split soul could even possess such a secret skill of possessing others. At the beginning, he had a playful mentality, and this wasn't intentional. This truly was called being capsized in the gutter. Fortunately, Lu Mu Yen was fine for now, otherwise had definitely be swallowed alive by all these people here. In Lu Mu Yan's sea of consciousness, a red silhouette came slowly towards her main soul. If you're sensible, then take the initiative to surrender the control of your body and I can leave you alive. The red silhouette was shrouded in a layer of mist and their face couldn't be seen, but the voice was very cold. With a thought from Lu Mu Yen, her main soul looked at the red silhouette indifferently, you don't have much ability, but your tone sure is arrogant. The red silhouette sneered, since you're so insensible, then there's no need for your main soul to exist anymore. Although this body wasn't as suitable for her to possess compared to the previous Aline body, but the physique was unexpectedly strong, which could be regarded as a kind of compensation she could only choose the next best. Lu Mu Yen didn't bother answering and just looked at her coldly. The red silhouette was obviously angered by Lu Mu Yan's indifferent attitude and immediately turned into a huge mouth, wanting to swallowing Lu Mu Yan's main soul. Lu Mu Yen narrowed her eyes and began to recite the Great Light Mantra as her fingers kept forming seals. Not long after, the red silhouette enveloped her entire soul energy around Lu Mu Yan's main soul and tried to devour and refine it, but was imprisoned by a purifying Buddhist mantra one after another and couldn't continue. But she didn't want to just give up like that. If she couldn't take Lu Mu Yan's body, then her split soul wouldn't be able to find another suitable person to possess. What's more, her split soul had just descended to this world and wasn't stable at all. If she couldn't fuse with a body of this interface within 3 days, she would be repelled by the natural laws of Tianling continent and her split soul would disperse. What the Holy Messenger was worried about was precisely a part of Lu Mu Yan's plan. She kept reciting the Light Mantra one to prevent the Holy Messenger from encroaching her main soul and depriving her body of sovereignty, and the other was to weaken the Holy Messenger's soul energy a little, then after 3 days, have the party's soul completely dissipate. The Great Light Mantra was a spell to release evil souls from suffering and was also a means of restraining sinister devil cultivators. Just when Lu Mu Yen and the Holy Messenger's soul were at a stalemate, a soft, gentle white silhouette also entered her sea of consciousness. The white silhouette didn't say a word and suddenly turned into sprinkles of shining starlight surrounding the red silhouette. Lu Mu Yen was stunned for a moment but felt that Mu Ning had absolutely no ill intent towards her. When Lan Si and the Holy Messenger faced each other, she used a special method enhanced by an array to telepathically speak to Mu Ning, telling her to wait for an opportunity to retrieve control of her body. She didn't expect Mu Ning's main soul to come after the red silhouette. Could there be some method to refine it? Lu Mu Yen didn't think for long. After about an incense stick of time, Mu Ning's weak voice sounded in her sea of consciousness. Mu Yen, quickly devour and refine her split soul. Then the flickering white starlight converged into a silver chain to bind the red silhouette. Lu Mu Yen was stunned, then said, you can devour it for yourself. This was Mu Ning's achievement, she wouldn't take advantage of it like this. She could also understand now. Mu Ning definitely cultivated some sort of secret skill related to the soul, otherwise it was impossible to trap such a powerful split soul of the Holy Messenger. My Mu clan specializes in soul attacks. Our soul energy is very strong, but we can't devour anyone's soul. Mu Ning's voice sounded again, and it could be regarded as an explanation. Then thank you greatly. Lu Mu Yen happened to have seen an introduction of the Mu clan in the Soul Skill Classic in the Inheritance Hall. Mu Ning didn't deceive her. The Mu clan was known as a clan that was favored by the deities. Their soul energy was exceptionally strong since birth, and they could obtain twice the result with half the effort by cultivation soul skills. But there was also a flaw, and that was that they couldn't absorb and refine other people's soul energy and elemental energy force. There was a natural law restricting it, otherwise if one could advance by absorbing other people's soul power, it would be heaven-defying. If it weren't for you today, I would have died long ago. I should be saying thank you. Mu Ning replied. Lu Muyen walked towards the red silhouette, smiled faintly, and said, "We don't need to be polite anymore, you're my elder cousin sister-in-law, I should save you." Hearing Lu Muyen's words, Mu Ning was stunned, then let out a chuckle, hurry up and refine it. Alright. Lu Muyen wasn't hypocritical either, and the power of her main soul immediately enveloped the red silhouette. As soon as she came into contact with the red silhouette, she found that the Holy Messenger's soul was extremely lifeless. It was obviously damaged severely by Mu Ning's soul attack. She didn't hesitate and immediately began to frantically absorb the split soul energy of the Holy Messenger. Lu Muyen planned to save Mu Ning from the very beginning, and because of this act of kindness, Mu Ning gifted her a fortuitous opportunity. When a third of the Holy Messenger's split soul energy was absorbed and refined by Lu Muyen, the silver chain that Mu Ning had transformed into also shattered inch by inch, and a white silhouette exited her sea of consciousness. At this time, the Holy Maiden had already been subdued by Ming Xiu and the others, and the other Holy Messenger's split soul was also pulled out by Lan Si. Mo Yen took it and tossed it into the pendant Lu Muyen wore. Because of negligence, Lan Si put Lu Muyen in danger, so he didn't argue with Mo Yen, and he was actually a little more worried about Lu Muyen's safety. This was the first time he had such an emotion, and he thought it was purely because he found Lu Muyen interesting. When everyone saw that Mu Ning's soul left Lu Muyen's body and returned to her original body, they were all nervous. Mo Yen, what's happening with Yenner? Ming Xiu's thin lips pressed together, and his eyes were filled with worry. If it weren't because Lu Muyen didn't show any abnormalities, and Mo Yen also told them not to act rashly, he already wouldn't have been able to stop himself using the secret skill of removing his soul from his body. It was just that this secret skill had a few drawbacks, and he was afraid that he would inadvertently hurt Lu Muyen's main soul, so until he had to, he didn't dare use it. Mo Yen replied lightly, "She's fine. She's now absorbing and refining that Holy Messenger's soul energy." When the several people heard Mo Yan's words, they all guessed that Mu Ning probably helped Lu Muyen. After all, the Holy Messenger's split soul's soul energy wasn't just at sword deity cultivation base. The powerful soul energy hidden within was something that even Ming Xiu and Lan Si right now wouldn't be able to refine even with their many soul attack methods. Of course, this was completely affected by their cultivation base and strength. If it were in Guangling world, Lan Si could kill that Holy Messenger with a press of his finger, not to mention refining her soul energy. The long eyelashes of the Holy Maiden who were subdued by Lan Si and Ming Xiu moved to cover up the emotions in her eyes. She didn't expect that this time, she would not only meet the people of the Ming Palace imperial family, but would also encounter the Southern Sea King's projected avatar. Although she was strong, but she wasn't even on the same level as Lan Si. What made her surprised was that Ming Xiu's strength was also so terrifying. Such training speed and talent potential would cause a bloody storm within the Ming Palace imperial family once he returned. Who knew what that person's attitude towards Ming Xiu would be? There was some mockery on her lips. Could this be regarded as her having too much luck or bad luck? If it weren't for the Holy Messenger exploiting a loophole, wanting to possess Lu Muyen, and Lan Si and Ming Xiu being afraid that an accident would happen to that woman, and that she, herself might still be of use, then they probably would have been unable to resist destroying her split soul. But so what if they were the Ming Palace's imperial family and the projected avatar of the Southern Sea King? If it were the split soul of the Southern Sea King or the original body descending, her split soul definitely wouldn't have a chance of surviving, but it being a projected avatar, she should still have a chance of escaping. With a thought, a dark bead that was as bright as a star spun incessantly in her sea of consciousness, carrying with it a mysterious energy that left heart palpitations of fear. It seemed that she had to use the thing that Honorable Devil Lord gifted. Advertise. Mu Ning's maternal clan was very special, so the soul attack against the Holy Envoy was very useful. Lu Muyen basically refined all soul energy without much effort. Most importantly, with Mu Ning's secret skill, the Holy Envoy's split soul's memories were all retrieved, and after absorbing it all, she also gained a lot of understanding and knowledge of the devil race of Guangling world. When the last trace of the soul energy was refined, her cultivation base also automatically broke through the bottleneck and entered peak phase Sword Saint. The Holy Envoy's split soul wasn't soul energy at sword deity stage to begin with, but was instead very powerful, so it was very beneficial to Lu Muyen. Not only did she advance to peak phase Sword Saint, but she was also one step away from the bottleneck of sword deity. With an opportunity, she could step into the highest realm on Tianling continent, a sword deity, in a palace in Guangling world. A shrill scream suddenly sounded from a room and the surrounding devil race servants ran in trembling. Pang! After a while, the corpses of several servants were thrown out by the screaming person, beyond recognition with an ugly death. Lu Muyen, this envoy must extract your soul and refine it. A shrill female's voice continued to sound and the resentment and hatred in it filled the entire hall. Her split soul was actually refined completely by a woman of a small interface, which not only made her cultivation regress a few steps, but her soul energy was also severely damaged. How could she not hate? As she roared viciously, she thought that it would only be a matter of time before Lu Muyen ascended to Guangling world with her talent. She would go to the hidden city organization in all 4 great realms and issue a wanted order. As soon as that woman came to Guangling world, she would definitely make her life worse than death with no return. A handsome man in black happened to walk to this palace with an indifferent expression, but when he heard the woman continuously scream out the name Lu Muyen, there was a flash of sinister light in his eyes. Who's screaming right now? Shen Mufeng asked with furrowed brow. Replying to Holy Sun Mufeng, it is a holy envoy under First Holy Maiden. I heard that her split soul was refined by a human sword master when it descended on a small interface, so she was angered. The person replied respectfully. Inwardly, he disapproved of the holy envoy under the first holy maiden. To actually have her split soul devoured by a human sword master of a lower world, how shameful it was to speak of such a thing. So it's a person under that old woman. Shenmue Feng restrained the emotions in his eyes. Pay more attention to this holy envoy, especially who shall be in contact with afterwards, and report to me if there's anything special. Although the holy envoy behind him was curious about why the holy son was suddenly interested in the people under the first holy maiden, but he didn't dare ask, as ordered. There was a merry arc on Shenmue Feng's lips, and he thought to himself, Lu Mu Yen, our grudge has yet to be over, but you've already forged a new grudge. It seems that I don't need to act first. He glanced at the hall meaningfully, then walked away. Within the altar of the land of inheritance, after about an hour, following Lu Mu Yen finishing her advancement, she slowly opened her eyes. Yenner, are you alright? Seeing this, Ming Xiu immediately stepped forward and asked worriedly. Yi Qing Han and Bing Ji also came over. Mo Yen knew about Lu Mu Yan's condition, so he didn't show any difference. Fine, I refined that holy envoy's soul energy, so I guess I got a huge bargain. Lu Mu Yen smiled sweetly. Hearing what she said, Ming Xiu and the others, as well as Lu Mu Bai and the others in Long Yao's inner space, were also relieved, and their hovering hearts completely lowered. That's good. Ming Xiu's thin lips melted into a smile. Seeing that Ming Xiu cared so much about that woman called Lu Mu Yen, the holy maiden felt a sense of irritability, so much so that she wanted to tear Lu Mu Yen to shreds immediately. She categorized all the men who looked similar to that person as her plaything, not to mention that Ming Xiu not only looked 40 to 50% similar to that man, but was also directly linked through blood with that person. If it weren't for the wrong timing, she would definitely not want to extract Ming Xiu's soul and refine it, but to bring him back to become one of her gigolo playthings. She hated all men who looked similar to that person getting close to other women. She lowered her gaze and hid the killing intent, then operated the black ball in her sea of consciousness even faster. Little Yenner, remember that you still owe me a favor. Lan Si regained his warm and jade-like temperament, looking at Lu Mu Yen with a soft smile as he said. Lu Mu Yen raised her head and rolled her eyes at Lan Si, saying, the heck do I owe you? If it wasn't for Mu Ning's help, I would have been killed by you. I was going to ask you how you're going to make up for my loss, but you're actually asking me for a favor now. Then she tossed Lan Si an expression as if saying, if you're still dreaming, hurry and wake up, obviously not acknowledging the previous favor. Although she could also escape without Mu Ning's help, but she would have had to slowly weaken the opponent's soul energy and wait for the natural law that would reject her soul to descend after 3 days, let alone being able to refine it to obtain such a huge benefit. Lan Si, this sinister fox, obviously underestimated the holy envoy earlier to cause such a situation to occur. If she let him take advantage of her favor now, she'd be a fool. Lan Si's expression froze, then he said with a smile, then don't I have to compensate you for the loss? How rare for you to come to this understanding. As expected, you truly deserve to be the wealthy and powerful king of the Southern Sea. Hee, then how does little Yenner want me to pay? Lan Si narrowed his fox eyes, and leaned over with a serious expression, asking, how about I pay you with myself, pledging to marry you? Hearing Lan Si's shameless words, Ming Xiu's phoenix eyes shone with a dangerous and dark light, while Yi Qing Han's entire body exuded an aura of frost. The 3 men behind Lan Si lowered their heads speechlessly. Was this still their prideful and arrogant king? Why did he look like a little wifey? They really wanted to tug his sleeves, and if the original body in Guangling world knew of you being so willful, would everything be alright? Lu Mu Yen glanced at Lan Si coldly. This innocent faking wolf truly was shameless. I'm not interested in you. Seeing that you're my former teacher, then just take out a few 2 or 3 layer heavy waters as compensation. Immediately, she raised an eyebrow and said with a half smile, your sea race shouldn't be short of such a thing, right? Lan Si and the 3 people behind him couldn't resist twitching the corners of their lips. What did she mean, just take out a few 2 or 3 layer heavy waters as compensation? This thing was also very rare and precious among the sea race, alright? In particular, 3-layer heavy water was a treasure among the almighties of the sea race, not to mention in a small place like Tianling continent, even in the sea realm of Guangling world, it had a price but was never on the market, and even high-level powerhouses were tempted by these things. This woman's tone sure was so arrogant that the 3 of them couldn't help but look at Lan Si obscurely with sympathy. They also wanted to know how King would deal with such a woman that demanded such an exorbitant price. One took the initiative to once. Lu Mu Yen looked at Lan Si with a half smile. He was worthy to be the king of a sea realm. His expression was still warm and graceful. No problem, isn't it just 2, 3-layer heavy waters? He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, how can I be stingy with things that little Yenner wants? Lu Mu Yen raised an eyebrow, then spread her palm out and said, then give it. Lan Si took out a 2-layer heavy water from his interspatial ring and placed it on Lu Mu Yan's hand, then said, the water elemental energy on Tianling continent is too thin, so I only have 1 2-layer heavy water. When I return to Guangling world, I'll gift you 10 3-layer heavy waters. Hearing Lan Si's words, Ming Xiu and Mo Yan's eyes gradually darkened. At the same time, this shameless person sure could invest. The 3 people behind him couldn't resist gasping. 10 pieces of 3-layer heavy water could buy several spiritual stone veins in Guangling world. Their king sure was generous. However, with the strength and status of King's original body, the extremely rare 3-layer heavy water in other people's eyes truly wasn't much in his. Although their original bodies were also very envious. Lu Mu Yen wasn't polite either. She put away the heavy water and said, who knows when he'll be able to ascend to Guangling world. What will I do if you don't acknowledge it? Lan Si suddenly had the urge to hold his forehead. This was the first time someone had questioned his ability and credibility. I, as the king of the Southern Sea, will owe you a few heavy waters? The heavy waters of the entire Guangling world and the lower interfaces were all refined by the sea race. Not to mention 3-layer heavy waters, even 5-layer heavy waters wasn't something uncommon to him. When did you have any credibility? Each time you pretend to be an innocent faking wolf. Lu Muyen pursed her lips, then thought about it with a merry grin. Since there's only one 2-layer heavy water, then give some high-quality and peak-quality spiritual stones to make up for it. Lan Si, this innocent faking wolf, was the king of the Southern Sea, plus, last time, he plotted against her and Ming Xiu, so she'd obviously have to extort him a little to release her anger. Either way, this damned fox sent himself to her door, so why not extort him? Lan Si was stunned for a while, then a look of speechlessness rose on his handsome face. Little Yenner, you sure have a big appetite. High-quality spiritual stones were nothing to him, but peak-quality spiritual stones were very useful to even his original body. Where could he go find them on this small interface? Do you think a projected avatar will carry peak-quality spiritual stones? Lan Si said with amusement. Then just give high-quality spiritual stones and middle-quality spiritual stones. Either way, I heard that people like you, sea kings and all, are so poor you only have money left. Lu Muyen shrugged innocently and put the heavy water into her interspatial ring, then extended her hand to Lan Si again. Qi Huang had already pupated and was transforming after devouring the grade 6 pill. After emerging from her cocoon, she'd be a tier 9 demonic beast, and by then, she would have great need for middle-quality and high-quality spiritual stones. Although Ming Xiu was the hall master of the Ming Chamber of Commerce Alliance, but because of the lack of spiritual force on Tianling continent, there were basically no peak-quality spiritual stones produced in spiritual stone veins. High-quality spiritual stones were rare, and the few middle-quality spiritual stones were also hoarded by major forces, so exchanges were limited. Lan Si couldn't resist twitching his lips again. What did she mean by people like sea kings and all were so poor they only had money left? Why didn't he know that? Would despise having more spiritual stones? But seeing Lu Muyan's eyes narrowing into crescent moons with her smile, with a face as if saying I'm extorting you, you're just a foolish spender, blatantly scamming him, he felt that it was really cute, and his heart couldn't help softening a little. This is all my spiritual stone savings on Tianling continent, I'll give it all to you. Lan Si put an interspatial ring in Lu Muyan's hand, paused, then said, I'll give you some high-quality and peak-quality spiritual stones when you arrive on Guangling world. If one couldn't sacrifice their baby, they couldn't catch the wolf. He had great interest in Lu Muyen, so naturally he wouldn't be stingy with her. Lu Muyen used her mental energy to check the interspatial ring and her eyes couldn't help revealing surprise. NOV-L-B//JNN. The interspatial ring Lan Si gave was filled with mountains of spiritual stones. Although there were many low-quality spiritual stones, but there was also quite a bit of middle-quality spiritual stones, and there were even tens of thousands of high-quality spiritual stones. This was a true local tyrant. Since you're so kind, then I want it, and I'll accept it. Lu Muyen put the interspatial ring away with a grin and said, but you still owe me the 10 3-layer heavy water and peak-quality spiritual stones. Lan Si just felt that there was some deeper meaning behind Lu Muyen's eyes, but he nodded, I'll remember. Teacher Lan, are you going back to Guangling world soon? Lu Muyen asked. Lan Si nodded, how did you know? The amount of spiritual stones here is so considerable, if you're not returning to Guangling world and couldn't take it with you, why would you give them all to me? Lu Muyen bluntly stated the guess she had. To deal with an innocent faking wolf like Lan Si who liked to use conspiracies, it was necessary to be straightforward and sincere to choke the opponent. Lan Si was indeed choked. Did this woman have to be so smart? Although he was indeed about to return to Guangling world, and these spiritual stones couldn't be taken with him either, but it didn't mean that these spiritual stones were completely useless to him. He gave them to her purely to cater to her petty temperament that loved money. What else do you want? He rubbed his brows and for the first time found that this girl would be so difficult to deal with. But he still couldn't feel the slightest anger in his heart. Let's write a jade slip IOU. Lu Muyen blinked and said, otherwise, after your projected avatar disappears, and I go to Guangling world, what happens if your original body doesn't admit it? She would definitely extort those 10 3-layer heavy waters and peak-quality spiritual stones. This innocent faking wolf was a huge local tyrant that could blind people with his riches. This time, let alone Lan Si, even the 3 people behind him couldn't calm down anymore. How dare this woman doubt the reputation of the king of the Southern Sea, the most mysterious and unpredictable sea realm? She was truly crazy. Little Yenner, how could you not believe me that much? Lan Si revealed an aggrieved expression. No. I trust you very much. Lu Muyan's expression looked as if it said hurry up and look at how sincere I am. Lan Si raised an eyebrow, then I still need to write an IOU? Of course. Lu Muyen rolled her eyes at him, I trust you, but it doesn't mean I trust your original body alright? Lan Si suddenly had the urge to vomit blood. Although he was only a projected avatar, but he was also a part of the original body alright? Although there would definitely be differences between his current self and the original body, but he wouldn't not acknowledge this. Alright. I'll sign it. Seeing Lu Muyan's expression cast on him as if saying is it that you can't even make the decision, Lan Si took out a jade slip and wrote an IOU using his mental energy and tossed it to her. In fact, he was also impishly wondering whether his original body would be angry after knowing his actions. There was an essential difference between projected avatars and the descent of split souls. Split souls were an inseparable part of the original body, while projected avatars could produce an independent consciousness and feelings. Of course, what the projected avatar did and the emotions they developed would also be conveyed to the original body, although it was hard to say whether there would be any profound impact. The several people watched Lu Mu Yen extort Lan Si with great interest, as if no one noticed the inexplicable black spot that appeared between Gu Yen Ran's brows. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter. Lu Mu Yen watched as Lan Si hesitated a little, then refreshingly signed an IOU. She put it away with a large smile on her face. Although there was an essential difference between the original body and the projected avatar, but their mental energy was the same, so the IOU signed by Lan Si was something that even if the Southern Sea King's original body was here, he also had to acknowledge it. Teacher Lan, you really deserve to be the Southern Sea King of the sea race in Guangling World. She said with a smile, when I go to Guangling World, you'll definitely find your original body to exchange this IOU. Lan Si said with a warm smile, no problem, as long as little Yenner is satisfied. At the same time, in a deep sea palace in Guangling World, a man with a handsome face and long blue hair slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were a blue deeper than the sea and his cold temperament carried some warmth like jade. He furrowed his brows, then raised his hand and swept it, muttering to himself, this damned projected avatar actually dared to use this king's mental energy to write that kind of lowly IOU. Then he narrowed his eyes and asked, facing the empty hall, how long until the projected avatar on Tianling continent returns? Reporting to King, it's estimated that there is another 6 months before the teleportation back. An voice resounded respectfully in the hall. The man stared into the distance, and no one knew what he was thinking. Lu Mu Yen? It was the first time a woman could make his projected avatar so interested. He hooked his lips up, not believing that Lu Mu Yen would really dare ask him to exchange the IOU signed by his projected avatar after she ascends to Guangling World. Soon, the name Lu Mu Yen was casually tossed out of his mind and he closed his eyes to enter cultivation again. The altar of Tianling continent. The black spot between Gu Yen Ran's eyes gradually expanded, then a grim smile flashed across her lowered eyes. She wanted to destroy the land of inheritance according to the plan, and while she was at it, all the people here would have their souls extracted and refined. Go die. Her voice was so low that no one would have noticed if they weren't paying attention. But everyone around her heard her. However, no one revealed a look of shock or fear. Instead, Ming Xiu and Lan Si exchanged a look and saw the certainty in each other's eyes. A black light burst out from Gu Yen Ran's forehead instantly, and Lan Si and Ming Xiu raised their hands at the same time. 2 layers of Daoist seals flew out and instantly entered Gu Yen Ran's forehead, enveloping the black light instantly. Yi Qinghan, who was standing opposite Gu Yen Ran, held a blue longsword, and with a slight wave, a silver of sword light instantly disappeared between her brows. Her originally calm and sinister expression instantly froze, her eyes revealed disbelief, and she pointed at the few people, stuttering, you all discovered long ago? Of course. Lan Si's deep eyes revealed some mockery, do you think that this king would make the same mistake after taking it lightly once? The pupils of the Holy Maiden gradually lost focus and a violent force in her sea of consciousness flew out from the top of Gu Yen Ran's head. It only just flew out when it was shrouded by a net of cyan-colored flames. A small golden dragon and a mini purple gold qilin also emerged from between the brows of Ming Xiu and Lu Mu Yen. Suppressed by the 3 flames, plus the laws of the interface, no matter how strong the Holy Maiden's soul energy was, there was no possibility of breaking free. When the Holy Envoy's soul entered Lu Mu Yan's body, Ming Xiu, Lan Si, and Yi Qinghan had long discovered that there was something wrong with the Holy Maiden. They didn't want to hit the grass and startle the Snake One because they were worried about Lu Mu Yan's safety, and 2, they wanted to lure the Holy Maiden to reveal her trump cards, otherwise there'd be endless troubles in the future. The 3 flames quickly intertwined and within the flames, a woman's shrill screams sounded along with incessant curses. This Holy Maiden will definitely extract your souls and refine it in the future, never to be reincarnated again. Her voice grew softer and softer, and she finally vanished in this space. Mo Yen opened his mouth and the cyan flame returned to his body. The Holy Maiden's soul had been marked with a unique seal of the devil race and couldn't be refined, otherwise the power of the soul would explode. Therefore, Mo Yen joined with Lu Mu Yen and Ming Xiu's spirit flames to annihilate her. The small golden dragon and mini qilin each returned to stand on their respective shoulders, looking tsundra, unbridled, domineering and proud, making both Long Yao and Bing Ji roll their eyes. And at this moment, Lan Si's expression changed, not good, let's leave. As soon as he finished speaking, a blue flying fish emerged from his body. With a sweep of his sleeves, all the people present landed on the flying fish. The flying fish needn't be controlled by Lan Si and swiftly flew out of the altar. At the same time, a cyan light emerged from the deep well in the middle of the altar, escaping in the opposite direction. Right after the flying fish and the cyan light rushed out of the passage leading to the altar at the same time, the entire pond suddenly shook on a massive scale. Boom boom. Several loud noises accompanied by Gu Yen Ran's body exploded like fireworks. Black light radiated from her body and the deep well was completely destroyed by the explosion. A deep dark crack suddenly appeared in the altar that had been destroyed and only a spatial storm remained. At the same time, an identical dark-colored crack appeared on a remote altar of the devil race in Guangling World. A black-clothed man whose face couldn't be seen suddenly quietly landed on a statue at the altar. Respected Lord, the split soul of the first Holy Maiden has been destroyed, but the task of destroying the altar on Tianling continent has been completed. A translucent silhouette knelt behind the man and said respectfully. After a while, the man in black said slowly, "Begin the plan." As ordered. In an underground palace of the devil race, a woman with a gentle and beautiful face suddenly opened her eyes and a large mouthful of blood spurted out. Her face looked hideous like a ghost. As the blood spurted out, her already pale face instantly turned paler, and her entire body was wet with a layer of cold sweat. Then another mouthful of blood spurted out and half her body actually became translucent. Her eyes were scarlet, filled with vicious hatred. "You destroyed my split soul, I will definitely make your lives worse than death." After a while, she calmed down, then quickly took a dark red pill, and closed her eyes to recover. A little while later, the gate of the underground palace opened and bodies of corpses that had yet to grow cold was sent in. Soon, the woman sitting cross-legged was surrounded by corpses, and traces of black death aura emerged from the corpses and entered the woman's body. The originally translucent half of the woman's body gradually stabilized, but the hideous look on her face didn't dissipate. Land of Inheritance. Lu Mu Yen and the others rushed out of the altar on Lan Sis flying fish in time. But soon, the entire land of inheritance began to tremble constantly starting from the altar, crumbling inch by inch, and all the land and trees and buildings were wrapped up in the spatial storm.n/o/vel/b/jn.c/jn.c/om. Waves of uncontrollable spiritual force formed hurricanes that naturally fell on all the human sword masters who were still alive in the land of inheritance. After an incense stick of time, the entire land of inheritance resounded with loud noises and finally began to collapse with the altar at its center. At this time, people in the land of inheritance, whether they were still accepting the inheritance or those who had completed their inheritance, were all enveloped by a cloud of spiritual force and completely lost consciousness. Not to mention the living pupils of the six sects, even Lu Mu Yen, Ming Xiu, and the others gradually lost their consciousness after being enveloped by the spiritual force. Spirit pets such as Mo Yen, Bing Ji, and Long Yao weren't spared either, and all fell asleep after being enveloped by a dense green mist. Outside the land of inheritance, the sect leaders of the six sects and the sword saints of the other major forces turned pale in shock, and they poured their elemental energy into magic tools. Quickly disperse. The sect leader of the heavenly secret palace shouted immediately after seeing the spatial rift storm that suddenly appeared in the passage that opened up. The others retreated right away and distanced themselves from it. Boom boom. After several explosions resounded. Everyone watched green balls of light flying out of the space leading to the land of inheritance, and after a while, the passage completely shattered and collapsed. What's this? A sword saint asked in surprise, looking at the green balls of light suspended in midair. If he didn't feel wrong, what's shrouded in these green light balls were people. The sect leader of the heavenly secret palace pondered for a while then said, "They met a huge fortuitous opportunity." Met a huge fortuitous opportunity? What do you mean? Huo Ling Long asked with furrowed brows. The land of inheritance shattered and collapsed, while the spiritual force inside was gathered by the soul energy left within the inheritance halls. It sent the pupils who went inside, out. The sect leader of the heavenly secret palace said, "All the pupils who are currently alive are shrouded in the most quintessential spiritual force in the land of inheritance and are absorbing them to the fullest. After the absorption of the spiritual force in the light ball, their cultivation level would probably advance a stage." What, advance a stage? The sect leader of the medicine sect asked in surprise, then doesn't that mean sword saint cultivation-based pupils could step directly into sword deity? How's that possible? Nothing's impossible. The sect leader of the heavenly secret palace smiled faintly, that's why I said that they encountered a huge fortuitous opportunity this time. Hearing the words of the sect leader of the heavenly secret palace, the sword saint powerhouses present were all envious. If some of their sword saint pupils advanced to sword deity after absorbing the spiritual force in the light ball, then it was no longer a huge fortuitous opportunity, it was practically a miraculous encounter. Alright now, you can't force fortuitous opportunities, it's not something to be envious of. The sect leader of the heavenly secret palace looked indifferent, paused, then said, "You all guard your side to prevent any high-level sneak attacks from the hidden city." Alright. Although envious, but the green balls of light enveloped their elite pupils. It was at least better than the people of the hidden city meeting such a fortuitous opportunity. Then in the sky above the swamp outside the land of inheritance, there would be fluctuations of advancements every 2 days. In the beginning, it was just the fluctuation of sword venerables advancing to sword saints, but later, there were successive tribulation lightning descending for advancements. Such a situation also attracted the attention of the sword deity powerhouses of the six sects and several major forces. Soon dozens of sword deities also arrived here. Boom boom. Thunder sounded again in the sky. A sword saint elder sighed and said, "This is already the third lightning tribulation of a sword saint advancing to sword deity. Their luck truly is good." The other sword saints were envious. The pupils who obtained the opportunity this time could not only advance a major stage, but also had the protection of the top powerhouses of the entire Tianling continent, occasionally helping guide and resist the lightning tribulation. Such an honor wasn't for every sword saint that gets promoted to sword deity. Time passed little by little, and Lu Mu Bai, Su Jin, and the others were also promoted to sword deity, while there were still green balls of light fluctuating in the sky. However, the green spiritual force being constantly absorbed by the two shrouded in it had faded a lot, and the people in the ball of lights were also gradually growing clearer. It's a well-known fact that Qi Xiu of the heavenly secret palace can advance to sword deity, but who knew that Lu Mu Yen, who's not even 20 years old, will also advance to sword deity? A sword deity ancestor of the sword sect said, not knowing whether to cry or smile, these two truly make us old people who only became sword deities after 100 years feel so unworthy. Come on, except for Qi Xiu and Lu Muyen, several other pupils have also advanced to sword deity in their 20s. Such a fortuitous opportunity is hard to come by. A sword deity ancestor of the medicine sect said. However, the talent of that Lu girl truly is amazing. He immediately added, although it's a fortuitous opportunity, but she also needs to have the ability to obtain it. She advanced to sword saint at such a young age, she's truly not outmatched by Qi Xiu. Haha, as soon as the medicine sect's ancestor's voice fell, a loud laugh came from the horizon not far away. Then several balls of light fell, and 6 elderly men walked out of the lights. Greetings, grand ancestors. The sword saint sect leaders and elders of the 6 sects immediately bowed respectfully when they saw the visitors. Tian Xian, what made you this happy? The grand ancestor of the heavenly secret palace asked with a light expression. Old man Tian Xian looked at a ball of light in the air with gentle eyes and said, this old man's direct pupils are advancing to sword deity one after another, of course this old man's happy. Su Jin being a disciple of old man Tian Xian, the several grand ancestors present all knew, but hearing his tone, it was obvious that it wasn't just Su Jin, this one disciple, who advanced. The grand ancestor of the sword sect had a relatively good relationship with ancestor Tian Xian. He looked up in the air and said, that little girl named Lu Muyen isn't also your direct disciple, is she? Haha, old man Tian Xian laughed aloud, you old thing still understands me. Lu girl is indeed the second direct disciple accepted by this old man. Seeing the proud appearance of old man Tian Xian, the ancestors all twitched the corners of their lips. However, it would be a lie to say they weren't envious. After all, after receiving such a talented disciple as Lu Muyen, this old man Tian Xian truly met some dog crap luck one. Boom boom. Suddenly, 7 colored spiritual clouds gathered in the sky and Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu, who were enveloped by the green spiritual force light balls, opened their eyes at the same time. Immediately, the two looked at each other tacitly, and there was a consonant smile on their lips. Not long after, purple lightning struck down one after another, one wave more ferocious than the next. However, the two of them weren't afraid at all. After taking out their natal array compasses and array flags, the two teamed up to set up an ancient, joint attack and defense array. The two's hands kept forming seals and they formed seals at practically the same time. Soon, the array was completed, and a light purple light cover enveloped the two of them. One after another, the purple lightning slashed down fiercely, and when it landed on the array, the light purple light cover gradually grew darker. The purest lightning power penetrated into the bodies of the two and continuously expanded their meridians and tempered their bodies. What? The Grand Elder of the Vast Mountain Sect's expression changed. Not only did they work together to set up a grade 7 array, but this array could even transform the power of the lightning that was born from the lightning tribulation into body-tempering lightning essence. This is incredible. This is also the first time this old man seen someone meeting lightning tribulations like this. Ancestor Yu Chan's eyes also revealed admiration and envy. In the past, when they advanced to sword deity, who wasn't afraid and who didn't prepare countless things to resist the lightning tribulation. Moreover, even after being fully prepared, they would still almost be half killed by the lightning, in an utter mess, and it wasn't even certain whether they'd advance successfully and survive. Aside from Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu, the pupils who had advanced to sword deity in succession had advanced successfully with the help of the other ancestors, but they were also struck, charred, and in a very sorry state. Only these two remained so elegant and graceful. N/O/vel/B/in.C//om. Seeing the merry expressions on the two of them, in addition to being jealous, envious and hateful, the people present could still only be jealous, envious, and hateful. Only Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu would regard being struck by lightning as a kind of enjoyment and fun. Not only were the two not afraid of the lightning bolts, but they could also make full use of the lightning tribulation. There had never been and never will be another two. This was the first time they've seen such a thing. Sure enough, such geniuses weren't normal people, they were both devilishly talented freaks. One met some luck. I guessed dog crap since that's generally what one says in Chinese. Two, an idiom meaning that they're one of a kind, basically, and most likely unmatched. Seeing that the array constructed by Lu Muyen and Ming Xiu in midair not only resisted the lightning tribulation descended on both, but also transformed the power of thunder and lightning into lightning essence, the eyes of the grand ancestors of the 6 sects all lit up. If such an array could be used on sword saints advancing to sword deity from the various sects, then the success rate would be increased by more than half. Tian Xian, this disciple of yours is a grade 7 array master? The grand ancestor of the heavenly secret palace asked in surprise. Just how old was this girl? Although His Highness also advanced to grade 7 array master before the age of 20, but his identity and background spoke for itself, and his resources were definitely much more abundant than Lu Muyen. Through comparing the two, it seemed that Lu Muyen's talent wasn't at all inferior to Ming Xiu, who was a favored son of heaven. N/O/vel/B/in.C//om. No wonder His Highness had such deep-rooted love for Lu Muyen. She was not only beautiful in appearance, her talent heaven-defying, strength shocking, but more importantly, there was a layer of tacit understanding between her and His Highness that no one could intervene with. Forget it. With His Highness' identity, it wasn't easy to find a sincere and tacit partner. He just hoped that their future path would be easier to walk. Seeing the surprise in the eyes of the grand ancestor of the heavenly secret palace, old man Tian Xian said smugly, of course. Just look at whose disciple that girl's is. Who can compare in arrays to this old man on Tianling continent? Others were speechless when they heard him compliment himself, but they had to admit that it was fact. Old man Tian Xian was a peak grade 7 array master. If it weren't for the constraints of this interface and his cultivation base, he probably would have already reached tier 8 array master. But I believe that it won't take long for the little girl to surpass me. Old man Tian Xian didn't think it was bad for his disciple to surpass the master, but instead, he took pride in Lu Mu Yan surpassing him. This girl's talent in arrays is truly outstanding. The grand ancestor of the medicine sect thought about it, then asked, I heard that she's also very talented in alchemy? Her talent in alchemy is just mediocre, she's only a late-stage grade 6 alchemist. Old man Tian Xian said with a humble smile. Hearing what old man Tian Xian said, the ancestors present couldn't resist twitching their lips. An 18-year-old late-stage grade 6 alchemist talent is just mediocre? Go to hell. This decrepit old thing was obviously smugly showing off. Seeing that he was smiling until his mouth was crooked, with a face as if saying quickly praise my pupil, he truly deserved a beating. I think the girl's talent in alchemy isn't weaker than her talent in arrays, and shall definitely become a grade 7 alchemist in time. The grand ancestor of the medicine sect glanced at old man Tian Xian who was so smug and said with a smile, if she's placed under your guidance, her talents would be buried, how about she come to our medicine sect to cultivate for a bit? He also knew a little about Lu Mu Yan's performance during the grand competition of the 6 sects. This girl even instructed a pupil of their sect to use the method of multitasking while refining pills. The method was even passed down in the medicine sect now. This sort of character gave him the urge to nurture her. After all, it was very rare on this entire Tianling continent for people to advance to grade 7 alchemist, even if she wasn't a pupil of the medicine sect. Old man Tian Xian originally looked as if he was bathing in the pleasant spring breeze, but when he heard that the grand ancestor of the medicine sect was going to dig his corner, his expression instantly darkened, and he said with a fake smile, you don't need to worry about the alchemy skills of this old man's disciple. It's just a matter of time before she advances to grade 7 alchemist, it'll definitely be super easy. The ancestors had the urge to vomit blood. Super easy to advance to grade 7 alchemist? You must be kidding. There was only a total of 5 grade 7 alchemists on the entire Tianling continent. Although Lu Mu Yan's talent was heaven-defying, but it would still be impossible to advance as easily as old man Tian Xian said. Alright, this old thing is just showing off, what are you doing paying attention to him? The grand ancestor of the vast mountain sect snorted and said disapprovingly. If it were that easy to advance to grade 7 alchemist, there wouldn't be so few high-level powerhouses on Tianling continent. Old man Tian Xian looked askance at the grand ancestor of the vast mountain sect, then took out a stone table and stone chair from his interspatial ring and sat down leisurely. Then a pot of spiritual wine with a fragrant and mellow scent appeared on the stone table. He looked at ancestor Yuchan and said, Yuchan, you have luck today, this is the grade 6 spiritual wine my Lu girl brewed. Come and have a taste. Ancestor Yuchan wasn't polite at all. He sat down beside old man Tian Xian and poured himself a cup and took a sip. His eyes lit up. He drank all the wine in the cup, then praised, this spiritual wine is more mellow and fragrant than before, it tastes excelling. Then he poured himself another drink and started drinking. Ancestor Tian Xian sure had great discernment skills. Not to mention everything else, just Lu Mu Yan's superb winemaking skills alone could crush all the spiritual wine masters among the 6 sects. The grand ancestors of the sword sect and spirit tamers sect were both alcoholics. Smelling the scent of this spiritual wine, without ancestor Tian Xian even inviting them, the two automatically sat down with full smiles and poured themselves a cup of wine. Good wine, good wine. The sword sect's grand ancestor's serious face revealed a rare excitement, then looked at ancestor Tian Xian and asked, this spiritual wine is truly brewed by Lu Mu Yan, that girl? Yeah. This spiritual wine is considered to be at the peak level of grade 6. Even the spiritual wine brewed by those 2 decrepit old things in the Stream Reflection restaurant isn't so mellow and sweet. The grand ancestor of the spirit tamers sect added. The grand ancestors of the heavenly secret palace and medicine sect glanced at each other and couldn't hold back either. They sat down and poured a glass each, then both revealed satisfaction after drinking. Tian Xian. Lu girl being under you is truly a waste. The grand ancestor of the medicine sect sighed while tasting the fine wine. Seeing the several people looking intoxicated, the grand ancestor of the vast mountain sect wasn't polite either. He grabbed the jug from the grand ancestor of the sword sect and poured himself a glass, then took a sip. Old thing, you're just envious of this old man. Lu girl's this old man's precious disciple, don't you have any ideas about her? Ancestor Tian Xian snatched the jug back, this is good wine this old man's disciple used to honor me, take it easy. I say Tian Xian, do you have to be so stingy? With such a high-level winemaker disciple, would you still lack spiritual wine to drink? The grand ancestor of the spirit tamers sect snatched the jug over, poured a glass, and said with a grin, if you've got other spiritual wines, also take some out for us to taste. The several people scolded ancestor Tian Xian inwardly over and over again. How could this decrepit old thing's luck be so good? Why couldn't they also accept a disciple who could brew high-level spiritual wine? Su Jin watched as the grand ancestors of the sect scrambled for Lu Mu Yan's spiritual wine that she brewed to honor ancestor Tian Xian like old naughty children. His lips raised in an arc. Master who had been silent for many years finally couldn't help but show off his junior sister. Thinking of the arrogant grand elders enshrined in his clan, as if they would give absolutely no face to anyone, he wondered if their jaws would drop when they tasted the spiritual wine in person, brewed by junior sister. His eyes were filled with smiles, then suddenly looked forward to that day. Boom boom. The last wave of purple lightning descended and the 7-colored spiritual clouds in the sky gradually dissipated. Immediately, 2 strong pressures spread out in the air and 2 figures, one white, one red, appeared in front of everyone beside each other. Advertisement. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter. Lu Mu Yen didn't expect that after the destruction and collapse of the Land of Inheritance by the Holy Maiden, the soul energy remaining in the Land of Inheritance would condense all the spiritual force together and gift them such a fortune. She hadn't even broken through to Sword Venerable for long after entering the Land of Inheritance, but after coming out, she was already at Sword Deity Cultivation base. Things like fortuitous opportunities truly was to be met but never to be desired. Feeling the boundless spiritual energy in her body, she had a gentle and happy smile on her lips. Ming Xiao could have advanced to Sword Deity after leaving the Land of Inheritance by borrowing the elemental energy he sealed within him, but with this fortuitous opportunity, he could now quickly arrive at the cultivation base required to ascend to Guangling World. Lu Mu Yen and Ming Xiao tacitly built an array, both advancing to Sword Deity together, then landed on the ground from midair in the open space outside the Netherdark Swamp. Master, Ancestor Yuchan Lu Mu Yen noticed several elderly men with profound cultivation base sitting together drinking, and was stunned for a moment, then went over to greet them. NOV.L.B/JNN. Old man Tian Xian had a smile on his face. Girl, you're also of the same seniority as this old man now. Whether it was in the immortal cultivation world, or this world, strength was respected, so seniority would also be upgraded with cultivation base. After Lu Mu Yen advanced to Sword Deity, she was also now of the same seniority as the Sword Deities of Tianling Continent, and the headmasters of the 6 sects had instead become her juniors. Lu Mu Yen chuckled and replied, Master, no matter what disciple's cultivation base reaches, you will always be my master. She didn't miss the smugness and cunning in the eyes of this cheap old man. He definitely wanted to show off the love between master and disciple intentionally in front of these Sword Deity grand ancestors. Although she hadn't been old man Tian Xian's disciple for long, but she regarded him as a master in her heart, so she was willing to play along with him. She knew from Ming Xiao that after she finished participating in the grand competition of the 6 sects, the people from the Hidden City and the Bai clan secretly attacked the Lu clan, but they were fully protected by a group of mysterious sword saints. He found out that those people were sent by her master and senior brother, which made her heart warm. Of course, this old man is still waiting for you to look after me after I retire. Old man Tian Xian said with a big smile. Lu girl, did you brew this spiritual wine? The grand ancestor of the sword sect serious face softened a lot, then added, by the way, I'm your eldest brother, Lu Mu Bei's master. Lu Mu Yen knew that her eldest brother's master was an ancestor of the sword sect, but didn't expect that he would be the grand ancestor of the sword sect. The distant expression on her face diminished a lot. She smiled and took out a few jugs of spiritual wine from her interspatial ring and stuffed it to the grand ancestor of the sword sect. I was just wondering why you looked so affable, so it turns out to be Big Brother's master. These are a few jugs of spiritual wine that I brewed, it's a trifle matter, nothing big. After seeing her big brother, he felt largely different to before, and it could be seen that this grand ancestor was truly caring for Lu Mu Bai. Naturally, she would repay with precious jade when one gives her a peach one. The grand ancestor of the sword sect was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting Lu Mu Yen to make such a sensible move. He laughed aloud, then immediately put away the jugs of spiritual wine in front of the envious eyes of others. You are indeed teachable. Little girl, you're much more lovable than that solitary boy Mu Bai. Although he said words of dislike, but the smile in his eyes still showed how satisfied he was with Lu Mu Bai, this disciple. Although Lu Mu Bei's temperament wasn't as lovable as Lu Mu Yan's, but he had always liked his temperament very much. His talent and comprehension abilities were also the strongest among his disciples, so he couldn't resist but focus on raising him. He didn't expect that this cold and indifferent disciple would have such an interesting little sister. Most importantly was that this little sister was also a high-level spiritual wine master. Then did that mean he wouldn't lack high-level delicious wines in the future? Then I will trouble ancestor to take more care of Big Brother in the future. Lu Mu Yen said with a smile. Your eldest brother obtained this great opportunity in the Land of Inheritance and has already been promoted to Sword Deity. There aren't many areas where I can help take care of him in the future. He smiled and said truthfully, but as this old man's disciple, this old man will naturally take care of him as much as possible. He wasn't talking big words. After all, Lu Mu Bai directly passed through late-phase Sword Saint and into Sword Deity, but his understanding and experience were still inferior. Then many thanks to Ancestor. Lu Mu Yen said with a smile when she obtained the promise of the Sword Sect's Ancestor. Compared with the several top powerhouses who had lived on Tianling Continent for more than 100 years, Lu Mu Bai, this newly promoted Sword Deity, still needed to be taken care of. At least in terms of cultivation experience, he could avoid some detours. Lu Mu Bai saw that his little sister honored his master for his sake, and a bit of warmth appeared on his cold face as a smile like a spring breeze overflowed from his lips. You stinky girl, not even honoring your master. What are you doing paying attention to that decrepit old thing? Old man Tian Xian said in a sour tone. Lu Mu Yen smiled and said without a good attitude, then is making sure you have enough wine being filial to you. Hearing Lu Mu Yan's promise, Ancestor Tian Xian said with a smile, that sounds about right. Immediately, he cast an obscurely provocative look at the grand ancestor of the sword sect, paused, then said, decrepit old thing, aren't you embarrassed to take the wine of a junior? It should be you giving the stinky girl a meeting gift, right? The grand ancestor of the sword sect glared at Ancestor Tian Xian. Of course he was going to give some gift after taking Lu Muyan's wine. Wasn't it just because he was interrupted by this decrepit old thing? Girl, I heard that you're a high-level alchemist. I happen to have 2 spiritual herbs, so I'll give them to you as a gift. He took out 2 boxes made of 10,000-year-old ice and handed them to Lu Muyan. Ancestor Tian Xian raised an eyebrow and said, just 2 rotten herbs and you think you can get rid of her? What do you know? These are spiritual herbs used to refine grade 7 pills. The Grand Ancestor of the Sword Sect rolled his eyes at him. Lu Muyan's eyes lit up when she heard that they were spiritual herbs used to refine grade 7 pills. She immediately took the box and said with a smile, then I won't be polite, thank you. After she advanced to Sword Deity, she had reached the minimum threshold to refine grade 7 pills. But because of the thinness of the spiritual force on Tianling continent, high-level spiritual herbs were rare, and grade 7 spiritual herbs were even more difficult to find. She was originally thinking of some way to obtain some high-level spiritual herbs to refine grade 7 pills, but here it was sent right to her door. Ancestor Tian Xian knew that Lu Muyan was very satisfied when he saw her smiling like a thieving little cat, and didn't say more, but he was still prepared to help this stinky girl extort the rich old things here. Lu girl, you still have spiritual wine, right? The Grand Ancestor of the Spirit Tamers sect was a wine lover, and seeing this kind of wine, he definitely didn't want to just nip a little from Ancestor Tian Xian. The other Grand Ancestors also agreed with a smile on their faces. After arriving at their age, there wasn't anyone who didn't like wine. They didn't have disciples like Lu Mubai, so this cunning girl naturally wouldn't take the initiative to gift them spiritual wine. They had to fight for it themselves. Before Lu Muyan could answer, Ancestor Tian Xian answered first, none, don't have ideas for this old man's disciple's spiritual wine. Hearing the words of old man Tian Xian, the faces of the Grand Ancestors darkened. This decrepit old thing had meat to eat but didn't want to give them any to drink. They could only pound their chest, wondering why they didn't go accept a spiritual wine master as a disciple, otherwise how could there be a time for this old thing to be so swollen with arrogance in front of them? One might have heard that the kindness of a drop of water will be repaid by a spring which is used more often. This peach one was used before in another chapter. Though after some research, although they have similar meanings, but the peach one apparently originated. Lu Muyan, this girl, hadn't spoken yet when Ancestor Tian Xian refused instead in a smug manner, and the several Grand Ancestors all ground their teeth. Tian Xian, old man, you can't say it like that. The Medicine Sect's Grand Ancestor said slowly and clearly, since the 6 sects advance and retreat at the same time, then if we have good spiritual wine, shouldn't we share together? That's right, Tian Xian, old man, did you scam us any less for Su Jin before? The Grand Ancestor of the Vast Mountain Sect said directly, just tell us, what are you trying to extort this time? Hearing the words of the Vast Mountain Sect's ancestor, the other Grand Ancestors also revealed an expression of understanding. They were just wondering why this old thing didn't weigh any benefits today, so it was because he was deliberately retreating in order to advance and waited for them. The Stream Reflection Restaurant was the property of the Su clan, and they had always known that Su Jin was the heir of the Su clan. Ever since Su Jin gained a firm foothold in the Su clan and gathered power for his use, they also obtained a lot of limited spiritual wine brewed by the 2 grade 6 spiritual wine masters of the Stream Reflection Restaurant through old man Tian Xian. But each time they made a transaction, this old thing would extort them fiercely. Although they hated, gritting their teeth each time, but they really couldn't resist the spiritual wine, plus they wouldn't lack the treasures with their status, so this situation continued until this day. You sure know me well. Ancestor Tian Xian said meaningfully, looking at the Grand Ancestor of the Vast Mountain Sect with a fake smile. The 8 Extreme Sect and the Vast Mountain Sect had always been at odds. Old man Tian Xian and the Grand Ancestor of the Vast Mountain Sect naturally often clashed and looked at each other with displeasure. If it weren't for the fact that their status and cultivation base were inconvenient, they would have had a fight each time they met. Naturally. I know your shameless virtue the best. The Grand Ancestor of the Vast Mountain Sect huffed. Sure. Since you've said this much, then if I don't ask for anything from you lot, wouldn't it be not giving you old things any face? Ancestor Tian Xian said bluntly with a half-smile. Now that his purpose had been exposed, he was too lazy to keep playing. The several people twitched the corners of their lips when they heard the words of Ancestor Tian Xian. Could they say, you don't need to give us face? Lu Muyan's lips hooked up when she heard her cheap master's words. This old man really was a naughty old child that pretended to be a righteous, proper, and virtuous man on the surface. Stinky girl, do you still have any spiritual wine you brewed? Old man Tian Xian looked at Lu Muyan and asked. Lu Muyan replied with some embarrassment, there are some but. Hearing her hesitant words, the Spirit Tamer Sect's Grand Ancestor who was addicted to alcohol hurriedly asked, but what? But there's not much. There are only 8 jugs of grade 6 spiritual wine left. Lu Muyan's expression appeared rather helpless. The smile in Ancestor Tian Xian's eyes were even denser. This stinky girl was indeed worthy to be his pupil, truly a cunning little fox. It was absolutely impossible for her to only have 8 jugs of spiritual wine, but she knew the truth that rare was the most valuable, and it was easier to extort things from these old things. Only 8 jugs. Old man Tian Xian revealed an expression of pity at the appropriate moment, then said casually to the people, this old man won't be a villain. Since you want spiritual wine, then the usual rule, exchange with your treasures, at most 2 jugs per person. How can 2 jugs be enough? The Spirit Tamer Sect's Grand Ancestor ignored old man Tian Xian and looked at Lu Muyan filled with smiles and absolute love, saying, little girl, you have more than 8 jugs, right? I'll use high-level spiritual herbs to exchange with you, how about it? He just saw that huge smile on Lu Muyan's face when she accepted the spiritual herbs from old thing of the sword sects. This girl should like spiritual herbs. Lu Muyan shrugged innocently, I really only have 8 jugs left. After all, I've been staying in the land of inheritance and had no time to brew spiritual wine. Then how about I exchange 10 spiritual herbs used to refine grade 7 pills for 4 jugs of spiritual wine? The spiritual herbs he prepared were originally for the Stream Reflection restaurant. Now that Lu Muyan's spiritual wine's grade was higher, the effect and taste would definitely be numerous times better, so he had absolutely no hesitation in taking it out. Lu Muyan thought about it, then looked at old man Tianxian, pretending to be a good little baby and replied, I'll listen to master. Ming Xiao and Su Jin, who stood behind her, couldn't resist hooking their lips when they saw her show such a pure, innocent, well-behaved appearance. Old man Tianxian laughed aloud, did you hear, my good disciple only listens to master's words. Seeing old man Tianxian look so smug, the grand ancestors just wanted to vomit blood. Why couldn't they find such a well-behaved and obedient disciple? If their disciples heard the inner roars of the several people, their foreheads would definitely be thick with lines. When weren't they obedient? Tianxian old man, how about exchanging 10 spiritual herbs for 4 jugs of spiritual wine? The grand ancestor of the spirit tamers sect asked.n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. Old man Tianxian had yet to speak when the others felt like they'd quit. You're too greedy. There are only 8 jugs of spiritual wine left, do you take us for dead, to exchange 4 jugs? The vast mountain sect's grand ancestor said without giving any face. Advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine was now the highest grade spiritual wine on the entire Tianling continent. Long-term drinking had the effect of improving one's cultivation base, not to mention Lu Muyan's spiritual wine also had the added millennium-old royal jelly, a spiritual item that could prolong life. Even if they gave them 8 jugs of such spiritual wine, they'd think it was too little, but this old thing sure knew how to scheme. The grand ancestor of the spirit tamers sect smiled shyly, isn't it because I thought you lot don't want it? You're the one that doesn't want it. I'll exchange 12 grade 7 spiritual herbs for 4 jugs of spiritual wine. The grand ancestor of the medicine sect said. He was a grade 7 alchemist himself, so he naturally knew the effect of the spiritual wine brewed by Lu Muyan. After drinking just a few cups, he felt that there was a very small, warm current flowing in his dantian and the spiritual force that transformed into elemental energy after passing through this small warm current actually turned out to be even purer. Although this kind of spiritual wine was only grade 6, but it had the function comparable to a grade 7. And on Tianling continent, there weren't any grade 7 spiritual wine masters, so the spiritual wine brewed by this girl Lu Muyan was definitely number 1. Seeing the several grand ancestors not at all looking like any supreme being, fighting over a few jugs of spiritual wine, the other sword deity ancestors also revealed some helplessness and envy. What could they do? A spiritual wine master was the scarcest profession and also the most popular. All the high-grade spiritual wine masters came from the Su clan, this well-established spiritual wine master clan, while all the other spiritual masters were at most grade 4. If one wanted to become a high-level spiritual wine master, they not only needed the talent for winemaking, but also needed wine recipes. However, wine recipes were generally not circulated outside, so high-level spiritual wine masters would basically become extinct. For their level of cultivation, only grade 6 spiritual wine could satisfy their appetites and needs, so they all inwardly scolded ancestor Tianxian again right now. Especially when Lu Muyan told this old thing that he would have more than enough spiritual wine, it made everyone jealous. After all, the long-term use of advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine had the same effect as a grade 7 pill, and it would not produce pill toxins like what happens after taking too many pills. Although the effect of spiritual wine wasn't as fast as pills, but there weren't any hidden dangers, and it wouldn't lose its effect due to taking it too much. Long-term drinking was for the best effect. Therefore, cultivators regarded spiritual wine very highly, and spiritual wine masters were more respected and rarer than alchemy masters no matter which interface they were on. I'll take out 13 grade 7 spiritual herbs. The grand ancestor of the heavenly secret palace said. I'll give. The several people had not yet decided the winner when suddenly, an elderly voice sounded. What kind of spiritual wine is worthy for you to all compete for? This old man doesn't believe that a girl can make spiritual wine that's more advanced and mellow than our Stream Reflection restaurant. Advertisement. The sudden arrogant and domineering voice interrupted the competition of several grand ancestors. As soon as Su Jin heard this voice, his elegant sword brows slightly wrinkled. The space here fluctuated, and an elderly man in golden clothes and an elderly man who wore silver clothes appeared in front of everyone, looking almost exactly the same. Lu Muyan glanced at the two of them faintly middle-phase sword deity cultivation base, and both wore arrogant and tyrannical expressions. Young lord. As soon as the two stepped there, they saw Su Jin standing beside Lu Muyan, and called out lightly. When they discovered that Su Jin showed a sword deity's cultivation base, both were stunned, but they were still very cold. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Why are the two elders here? Su Jin's voice was calm like water. After the Su clan received the news that the hidden city was going to wipe out the younger generation of pupils in the land of inheritance, ancestor asked us two to come over to protect the safety of young lord. The elderly man in golden clothes replied. The silver-clothed man scrutinized Su Jin, then said indifferently, but it seems that young lord no longer needs the protection of us two. I indeed don't need the protections of you two anymore. Su Jin nodded elegantly, with a faint smile on his handsome face, so you can both leave. These two were the initial level grade 6 spiritual wine masters of the Su clan aside from the N-Seater. They were very famous throughout the entire Tianling continent. The most expensive and limited edition spiritual wine sold by the Stream Reflection restaurant were from the hands of these two. However, these two had always been very aloof, and in the Su clan, they looked down on everyone except the ancestor. Of course, although he was at odds with the two of them, the two didn't cause trouble for him on the management of Stream Reflection restaurant. As bloodlines belonging to the Su clan, even if they didn't like each other, they wouldn't cross the line. Since young lord does not need our protection, then we've also got nothing to do. The elderly man in golden clothes nodded. He was also relieved to see Su Jin was still alive, but seeing the other party had met some sort of unknown fortuitous encounter and rose to sword deity, the two had an indescribable complicity in their hearts. As an old brand, the Su clan could even be said to be the only spiritual wine clan on the entire Tianling continent, and the heirs of generations were all spiritual wine masters, but Su Jin couldn't brew wine at all due to his innate physique problems. Although Su Jin's talent in business was very strong, but the fact that he couldn't become a spiritual wine master made them feel a little unacceptable that he would be the next patriarch of the Su clan, so their attitude towards him was so indifferent. The silver-clothed elderly man had long been accustomed to Su Jin's attitude and didn't care, but instead set his sights on Lu Mu Yen. Little witless girl, you can brew grade 6 spiritual wine? He looked Lu Mu Yen up and down, with disbelief in his eyes. Hearing his words, Ming Xiu and Lu Mu Bei's eyes grew cold, and Su Jin's brows furrowed even deeper. Lu Mu Yen raised an eyebrow and chuckled, so what if I can? Do you old men have any advice? Now that she had advanced to sword deity, she and these two old men belonged to the same seniority, so even if her attitude was disrespectful, no one would think it was abnormal. On the contrary, if she advanced to sword deity, but she was still extremely respectful when she saw the two of them, ignoring their provocations, then the sword deity powerhouse present would probably look down on her. Us brothers are both middle-level grade 6 spiritual wine masters, heard you can brew grade 6 spiritual wine, so we want to exchange pointers with you. The silver-clothed elderly man said indifferently. His tone was as if exchanging pointers was giving Lu Mu Yen some huge face, and a huge honor. They also smelled the spiritual wine in Ancestor Tian Xian and the other's hands, and it was indeed advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine, and was even better than them in terms of quality and fragrance. But they absolutely didn't believe that such spiritual wine came from the hands of this pipsqueak little girl. They usually hated liars who used spiritual wine to deceive people for spiritual herbs. Obviously, Lu Mu Yen had been branded a liar in their eyes right now. Why should I exchange pointers with you too? Lu Mu Yen sneered. So it appears that these two old things were here to smash her stage. The words liar were blatantly written in their eyes when they looked at her, which made her very unhappy. It's because you don't dare, right? The silver-clothed elderly man sneered, so young but doesn't earn well and used to deceive things using spiritual wine brewed by others. After listening to the words of the silver-clothed man, except for Ancestor Tian Xian, the other grand ancestors all furrowed their brows subconsciously. To be honest, they really didn't believe that the grade 6 spiritual wine was brewed by Lu Mu Yen. After all, there were only 3 grade 6 spiritual wine masters on the entire Tianling continent, and they were all descendants of the Su clan. Not to mention whether Lu Mu Yen even has that talent, but how could she have grade 6 wine brewing recipes? This was a huge question. At this time, they couldn't help but feel a little shaken. Could it be that this spiritual wine was brewed by someone else, and Lu Mu Yen not only took it as her own, but also took their credit? If that was the case, then the character of this girl sure was bad. However, since the first impression of Lu Mu Yen wasn't bad, the grand ancestors were still dubious. Fuck your shit. Ancestor Tian Xian was furious. Not to mention these two decrepit old things using spiritual wine to act arrogant in front of them, now they actually dared to say that his treasured disciple was a liar. You motherfuckers haven't learnt well, so old and rude. Seeing the otherworldly, elegant Ancestor Tian Xian swearing at the two of them, all the sword deity powerhouses present couldn't resist twitching the corners of their lips. The silver-clothed elderly man's expression darkened hearing what he said, but he couldn't learn the way of Ancestor Tian Xian and swear, so he stretched his neck and said, those who are innocent will naturally not be afraid. Since you really have that ability, why don't you dare to compete against us brothers? On Tianling continent, only them two brothers and the ancestor were grade 6 spiritual wine masters. Now that someone suddenly appeared claiming to be a grade 6 spiritual wine master with an even higher level than them, they were naturally extremely unhappy in their hearts. They also thought that this little girl had no such ability. As for this spiritual wine, it could be obtained from the land of inheritance. You bastard, whether this old man's disciple is a grade 6 spiritual wine master needs you to appraise? What are you guys? Old man Tian Xian snorted coldly. If it weren't for the stinky girl's voice transmission just now to make him add some more fire and anger the two, he wouldn't be so wordy either and would just beat them down then talk. Humph, we are the authority of the spiritual wine masters of the entire continent, and have the right to appraise real or fake grade 6 spiritual wine masters. The silver-clothed man also snorted coldly. Although the golden-clothed elderly man didn't speak, but his attitude was obvious, today, they must expose the deceitful behavior of this girl. Lu Mu Yen smiled, without the slightest anger or guilt on her face, her expression calm and composed, the faces of you two sure are big. It's impossible that whatever you say, I should listen, right? You obviously don't dare to compete with us, which means that you're a fake frayed 6 spiritual wine master. The silver-clothed elderly man said with disdain. Seeing that the other party was a sword deity and a disciple of old man Tin Xian, he restrained somewhat, but this girl's attitude was truly arrogant, so he didn't bother giving her face anymore. If you let me compete, I compete, then isn't it that I have no face? Lu Muyen raised an eyebrow. The golden-clothed elderly man gave her a meaningful look, then asked, then what do you want? If you raise the stakes, they'll consider competing with you too. Lu Muyen swept the two of them up and down with her eyes, then said with a smile that wasn't quite a smile, the 2 top spiritual wine masters of the continent should also be one of the top in terms of wealth, right? Do you dare to gamble? We are indeed rich, but what can you, a newly promoted sword deity, use to bet with us? The silver-clothed elderly man sneered. Even if I'm not rich, don't I still have my master and senior brother? Lu Muyen looked askance at him, and asked arrogantly and provocatively, bet or no bet, one sentence, if you don't bet, scram. These 2 decrepit old things must be rolling in riches. Since they were fat sheep sent to her door for her to slaughter, how could she be polite? Ancestor Tian Xian and Su Jin both nodded when they heard Lu Muyen's words, expressing their unconditional support for her. Ming Xiu stood to the side and looked at Lu Muyen with doting eyes. Since she wanted to play, then she could play however she liked. You stinky girl sure is arrogant. The silver-clothed elderly man was filled with anger. It was the first time them brothers met someone who told them to scram. If I'm not arrogant, then my master will lose face because of me. Lu Muyen folded her arms, still looking unbridled and arrogant. Could it be that when I'm being bullied by you two, I still have to give my cheek to you to slap? Where did you two get that confidence from? The banner that is her cheap master should be used, why not? Huh, this old one's disciple naturally must be arrogant and domineering. If anyone dares to bully, then even if the opponent's beaten to death, this old man will bear everything. Ancestor Tian Xian laughed, but the gaze he used to sweep the two had no warmth. Others couldn't help but feel a chill when they heard his words. So it seemed that this girl, Lu Muyen, was so arrogant because Ancestor Tian Xian condoned it. However, whether it was strength or status, Ancestor Tian Xian was qualified to speak such words. His disciples also indeed had the capital to be arrogant and tyrannical. The golden-clothed and silver-clothed elderly men's expression both looked very ugly when they heard his words. They immediately added old man Tian Xian to the blacklist for selling spiritual wine to in the future. Since Ancestor Tian Xian is so confident in your disciple, then it appears that there's no need to ask our young lord to continue to buy limited edition spiritual wine from Stream Reflection Restaurant in the future, right? The golden-clothed elderly man said with an unhappy expression. Ancestor Tian Xian nodded. I can't even finish the grade 6 spiritual wine my disciple brews, would go out to buy it. As soon as he said these words, the other grand ancestors wanted to vomit blood. This old thing was here to draw hatred, right? Humph, I hope Ancestor Tian Xian will remember what you said today. The golden-clothed elderly man snorted coldly. This decrepit old thing better not ever think he'd be able to buy a single drop of spiritual wine from Stream Reflection Restaurant again. He wanted to see the young girl make a fool of herself and the expression of regret on this Tian Xian old thing. I say, do you want to bet or not, the two of you? We don't have so much time to waste with you two. Lu Muyen looked at the two of them unkindly and said. These two people were purely so used to being praised and cherished, but now that they met someone who didn't go with what they liked, they couldn't accept it. They were the classic self-centered people, as if the entire population of Tianling continent needed to revolve around them. Of course, well bet. The silver-clothed elderly man said, you're a junior, so we won't bully you. You can decide the bet. Sure. Lu Muyen said with a blunt smile, if you lose, give me 50 level 7 spiritual herbs and 300,000 middle-quality spiritual stones. If I lose, I'll give you 50 advanced level grade 6 pills and 300,000 middle-quality spiritual stones. Lu Muyen asked provocatively, how about it? Dare to do it? After listening to Lu Muyen's words, both of them were stunned. 50 level 7 spiritual herbs and 300,000 middle-quality spiritual stones were too big of a bet. But they thought that they naturally wouldn't lose, and also had the amount, so it was acceptable. The two exchanged a look, and the silver-clothed man sneered, the bet's fine, but how do we know if you have 50 advanced level grade 6 pills or not? They were only middle-level grade 5 alchemists and spiritual wine masters, so they naturally needed advanced level grade 6 pills, but they didn't believe that this girl could take out 50 of them. Then how about we invite the 5 grand ancestors of the 5 sects to be the judges and also place our bets together with them, so whoever loses won't be able to deny it? Lu Muyen suggested. The two nodded, all right. Without hesitation, the two gathered 50 level 7 spiritual herbs and 300,000 middle-quality spiritual stones, placing them on the table in front of the grand ancestors. Lu Muyen also took out 50 advanced level grade 6 pills that she had refined in the land of inheritance, and the spiritual stones she extorted from Lan Si, placing them together. The bet was successful. The sword deities of the other major forces had been paying attention over here since the two golden-clothed and silver-clothed elderly men appeared. Hearing that the two grade 6 spiritual wine masters of the Stream Reflection Restaurant were going to compete with the direct disciple of Ancestor Tian Xian, they couldn't help but become interested and came over one after another. Because the Hidden City's plan was made public, so Yi Qing Han's maternal grandfather, Tianyuan City Lord, also arrived. Yi Qing Han had been by his side ever since he advanced to sword deity, and he was now also following him to go to the site of the 6 sects. Just after taking just a few steps, a strong elderly man walked over with a young and beautiful woman. City Lord Imo, how are you? The elderly man appeared to have a slightly rich tummy, and smiled genially. The Tianyuan City Lord's temperament was relatively aloof and cold, and he nodded faintly. Brother Ji, how are you? This must be the young City Lord. Ancestor Ji smiled and looked at Yi Qing Han and said, indeed a talented kid. Although Yi Qing Han was designated as the young City Lord of Tianyuan City, but he was very low profile and secretive, and rarely appeared in front of everyone, so Ancestor Ji only heard about him from his granddaughter, but never met him in person. Seeing that Yi Qing Han had advanced to sword deity because of a fortuitous encounter in the land of inheritance, a scheming light flashed by Ancestor Ji's eyes, and he smiled more lovingly. Ancestor Ji overpraises. Yi Qing Han's attitude was rather indifferent and casual. Ancestor Ji didn't care about his attitude either. He was used to seeing the coldness of the City Lord of Tianyuan City, and in fact felt that it was normal for Yi Qing Han to be so cold and indifferent. Ning Meng greets City Lord grandfather, young City Lord Yi. Ji Ning Meng's eyes were light, and she walked gently beside the two of them with a smile and greeted formally. Ancestor Mo placed his eyes on her for a few breaths, then revealed a look of satisfaction. Young Miss Ji is dignified and generous, Brother Ji is blessed. Huh, City Lord Mo over compliments. If you say that, her little tail will wag up to the sky. Ancestor Ji laughed loudly, showing his love for Ji Ning Meng, his granddaughter, without any concealment. Ji Ning Meng glared cutely at Ancestor Ji. Grandfather, how can you say that about granddaughter? Her peripheral vision observed Yi Qing Han. Especially after advancing to sword deity, he was even more solitary and noble with the temperament of a powerhouse, which made her heart beat wildly. Yi Qing Han's attention wasn't here at all. His thoughts had long run over to the site of the 6 sects. Qing Han, I and Ancestor Ji will go over to the 6 sects for a look. You can accompany young Miss Ji to take a stroll around. The coldness in City Lord Mo's eyes was replaced by gentleness. Yi Qing Han furrowed his brows slightly and said coldly, not interested. After he finished speaking, he didn't even care for what the three thought, and walked straight to the site of the 6 sects. Because the land of inheritance had not yet completely collapsed, so the people here weren't in a hurry to leave, wanting to see if there were any other fortuitous opportunity. There was a trace of surprise on Ancestor Ji's face. This young City Lord sure was unbridled and arrogant. However, with his granddaughter's beauty and methods, if she could get Yi Qing Han, who had such a temperament, to fall in love, then she would definitely be spoiled. Ji Ning Meng wasn't annoyed by Yi Qing Han's coldness. On the contrary, he made her feel even more infatuated. The expression on City Lord Mo's face didn't change, and he sighed. Qing Han's temperament is relatively cold, don't mind it, Brother Ji. Not at all, young City Lord is only revealing his true temperament. Ancestor Ji said with a smile. City Lord Mo nodded and said, let's go too. He naturally loved Yi Qing Han, this grandson. Especially because of his own mistake many years ago, he was taken by the Yi clan's madam to raise. It made it difficult to cultivate deeper feelings between grandfather and grandson after so many years of separation, so there was always a sense of guilt. It was precisely because of this guilt that he wanted to find a suitable wife for Yi Qing Han, but he never thought that his grandson would be so disgusted and repelled by it and instead aggravated the contradiction between grandfather and grandson. He sighed inwardly. Was this considered doing a bad thing with a good heart? Heart? Forget it. If Qing Han really didn't like that girl of the Ji clan that he thought was pretty good, then the marriage should be forgotten. On the site of the 6 sects, people were constantly gathering to watch the fun. After setting down the bets, Lu Mu Yen casually swept the people who came up to surround them with her gaze. Are we going to compete here? She looked at the golden-clothed and silver-clothed elderly men, asking indifferently. The golden-clothed elderly man furrowed his brows subconsciously. When spiritual wine masters brewed spiritual wine, it was always very secretive, so he didn't like it very much to brew it in front of so many people. Of course, it will be fairer to compete in front of so many cultivator friends in case when the time comes, someone says we're bullying the weak. Although the silver-clothed elderly man didn't like to brew wine in such an environment, but to expose Lu Mu Yen as a liar, he could only resist. Sure. Then the rules? Lu Mu Yen continued to ask. She was only interested in the stakes, as for the rest, she could let these two decide. Aren't you capable of refining advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine? The silver-clothed elderly man asked. Lu Mu Yen nodded, yeah. The two of us are intermediate level grade 6 spiritual wine masters. If you can really brew advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine, you win. The silver-clothed elderly man paused, then said arrogantly, of course, in order to show fairness, the two of us will also brew spiritual wine to compete with you. Sure. Then let's start now. Lu Mu Yen said leisurely. It was more troublesome to brew advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine than refine grade 6 pills, and would take a relatively longer time. Because old man Tian Xian was Lu Mu Yan's master, so he didn't join the judges. The judges were made up of the grand ancestors of the 5 sects. When the competition was about to start, there was another fluctuation in the air. Huh, how about we join in the fun? After a powerful voice fell, everyone watched 4 elderly men appear. Ming Xiu's eyes flashed with thought. The grand elders of the Pill Tower, Smithing Pavilion, Array Alliance, and Tamer's Pagoda also appeared. Them suddenly appearing shouldn't be so simple. It must be that the hidden city was acting again. So it's you 4 old things. Old man Tian Xian said with a smile, since you're here, why don't you join the gamble and be judges? Sure. This old man is very interested in this bet. The Grand Elder of the Pill Tower said with a smile. Tian Xian, even you've invited, we have no reason to refuse. The Grand Elder of the Array Alliance also smiled and agreed. The other two also nodded in agreement, so they sat beside the Grand Ancestors of the six sects to watch. The two golden-clothed and silver-clothed men were naturally eager for more top powerhouses of the continent to come, so as to not weaken the name of their Su clan. Su Jin's elegant and handsome expression revealed a half-smile. These two old things were definitely going to be scammed to the end. The entire Su clan's face would probably be lost this time. But why did he feel that bit happy in his heart? Thinking of that so-called father and stepmother's face changing, his mood was impeccably good. If it weren't for the relationship with his grandfather, he would be too lazy to be some young lord of the Stream Reflection restaurant. This time, he might even be able to get rid of that energy-consuming but thankless status through what Junior Sister's doing. What kind of situation his good little brother would bring to the Su clan had nothing to do with him anymore afterwards. Junior Sister said that his chronic illness would be able to be treated in 2 days, plus he had now advanced to sword deity. It gave birth to a hope of ascending to Guangling world. Naturally, he wouldn't be so bored to waste energy to help run some family business. Let's start. The Grand Ancestor of the Heavenly Secret Palace said. As soon as his voice fell, a square table appeared in front of the golden-clothed and silver-clothed elderly men and Lu Mu Yen, which was convenient for placing things. The two immediately took out the materials for brewing intermediate-level grade 6 spiritual wine. With a thought, many spiritual herbs and pots and jars also appeared on the table in front of Lu Mu Yen. While they prepared, there were also whispers from other places. It's the first time I've seen a spiritual wine master brew spiritual wine. How can I tell what grade of spiritual wine it is when it's finished? Isn't there a need to ferment? A sword deity from the Spirit Tamers sect asked. His words were also the questions in the hearts of many people present. A sword deity beside him happened to be an ancestor of the medicine sect, and he explained, spiritual wine masters are different to the wine masters of the mortal world. The wine masters in the mortal world need to filtrate, distill, ferment in the cellar and other processes, but brewing spiritual wine doesn't. You all know that spiritual wine masters not only need a talent for brewing wine, but also needed to be an alchemist. They must first refine the spiritual wine pills as the main ingredient for fermentation, add spiritual herbs or spiritual fruit, then finally add some spiritual spring and use flame to distill. Because of the effect of the wine pill, coupled with the distillation of the flame, the fermentation in the cellar can be omitted. Therefore, you can immediately tell the grade of the spiritual wine brewed. The ancestor of the medicine sect added, of course, the old saying old wine is fragrant still applies. The brewed spiritual wine can be stored for a period of time for better taste, and the spiritual herbs in the wine would have better effect. So that's how it is. After listening to his explanation, others also revealed understanding. Then do you think that girl can really brew advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine? An ancestor of the vast mountain sect said with some doubt, I think it should be difficult for her to reach such a level as a spiritual wine master at her age. The conditions for becoming a spiritual wine master were too harsh, so the scarcest on the entire continent were spiritual wine masters. He didn't believe that Lu Mu Yen could become a grade 6 spiritual wine master at her age. His words were also the inner voices of many people present. No one had ever heard of such a young spiritual wine master. That's hard to say. The advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine is indeed real. The ancestor of the medicine sect was uncertain. Seeing that Lu Mu Yen had become a sword deity, and Ji Ning Meng, herself, had only advanced to advanced phase sword saint borrowing the fortuitous encounter of the land of inheritance, she was extremely unhappy and harbored hatred. Why did this damned girl have such good luck? Grandfather, do you think that Lu Mu Yen can brew advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine? Ji Ning Meng's tone was a little unhappy. Unhappy. Ancestor Ji naturally knew about Lu Mu Yen, and also disliked her. After all, Bai Fei Yao became trash because of this girl, and with such advancement speed, she was simply their obstacle. At her age, brewing advanced level grade 6 spiritual wine would be as difficult as rising to heaven. Ancestor Ji smiled faintly but didn't reveal his dislike for Lu Mu Yen on the surface. Ji Ning Meng asked with a gentle smile to the Tianyuan City Lord, Grandpa Mo, what do you think? I don't quite agree. If she doesn't have this ability, why would she propose a bet in public? City Lord Mo revealed interest in his eyes, she's the direct disciple of Ancestor Tian Xian. If she doesn't have some skill, she wouldn't brainlessly smear her master. If Lu Mu Yen really lost in front of so many people today, she would not only lose her bet, but also Ancestor Tian Xian's face. And would Ancestor Tian Xian accept such a stupid disciple who didn't know how high the sky was? Obviously impossible. Hearing City Lord Mo's words, many people revealed expressions of deep thought, and thought it was also reasonable. Ji Ning Meng only felt suffocated. She didn't expect City Lord Mo to say this, but she didn't believe that Lu Mu Yen had such ability. The cold eyes of Yi Qing Han looking toward City Lord Mo showed a rare bit of gentleness. Maternal grandpa's words are very reasonable. Mu Yen will win. Note: Yi Qing Han seldom revealed such a gentle gaze in front of the Tianyuan City Lord. He always looked cold and like he didn't care about anything. Qing Han, you just called that girl Mu Yen? City Lord Mo had clearly captured the emotional changes of his grandson. You know that little girl? Mu Yen is a very important friend to me. Yi Qing Han replied after thinking for a bit. City Lord Mo didn't expect his cold-hearted grandson to have an important friend. He originally wanted to unite through marriage with the Ji clan because Ji Ningmeng was gentle and sensible, and would be a good and virtuous wife. Yi Qinghan didn't need to like Ji Ningmeng much, but he wanted to give his grandson the feeling of a family. He guessed that if he found a gentle and generous woman for him to marry and have children, maybe his grandson's temperament wouldn't be so cold. The expression in his eyes changed. It seemed that he had thought wrong this entire time. No wonder Yi Qinghan's attitude towards him was colder recently. So she's Qinghan's important friend. City Lord Mo revealed a smile on his face, then this little girl will win. Since his grandson said that Lu Mu Yen would win, then he would completely believe his grandson's judgment. She will definitely win. Yi Qinghan's handsome but extremely cold expression softened a lot, and the corners of his lips raised into a short-lived arc. Contrary to the attitudes of City Lord Mo and Yi Qinghan, Ancestor Ji and Ji Ningmeng weren't so happy, and there was even a haze in their eyes. Ancestor Ji looked in Lu Mu Yan's direction with an unpredictable gaze, planning how to get rid of her. Only he knew that the news that Tianyuan City wanting to unite through marriage with the Ji clan wasn't released by Tianyuan City, and it could even be said that the two didn't even reach the point of agreement to unite through marriage. It was just that City Lord Mo was quite satisfied with his granddaughter. He once tentatively joked about making Ji Ningmeng and Yi Qinghan a pair, and City Lord Mo didn't agree nor disagree. After that, City Lord Mo's attitude towards him wasn't so cold either, so he planned to have the two clans unite in marriage. The power of Tianyuan City was very important to the Ji clan, and only through marriage could they devour the other party. He couldn't let this girl surnamed Lu to get involved. Ji Ningmeng could finally feel Bai Fei Yao's hatred for Lu Mu Yen. Senior brother Qi, who Bai Fei Yao liked, was seduced by Lu Mu Yen, and now her betrothed, Yi Qinghan was also seduced by this fox spirit. What was so good about that little bitch? Wasn't it that she just looked a little beautiful, but she and Bai Fei Yao were both first-class beauties. Hearing Bai Fei Yao speak of Lu Mu Yen, plus what she saw in the land of inheritance, she had some guesses in her heart. Could it be that elegant men like Qi Xiu and Yi Qinghan didn't like pure, cute, or gentle and generous women? What they liked instead were people like Lu Mu Yen, rude, wild, and a woman who didn't know how to be a lady? Yes, for them who were accustomed to seeing gentle and generous women of large clans, perhaps they would be attracted by the savageness and willfulness. She thought a little. Maybe she should properly change her image in front of Yi Qinghan. Here, Lu Mu Yen took out the 7-colored glazed cauldron, and tossed the spiritual herbs into it, refining the advanced level grade 6 wine pill in one go. Wine pills were special pills, and could only be used as main ingredients for winemaking, so even if they refined 10 wine pills, it wouldn't attract an alchemy tribulation. She slapped the pill cauldron, and 15 clear, round wine pills flew out, all of them landing in a winemaking cauldron specifically used for winemaking. Lu Mu Yan's wine cauldron was made from obsidian fluorite and had the same auxiliary effect for brewing wine as the 7-colored glazed cauldron did for pills. The alchemists present, including the Grand Elder of the medicine sect, watched Lu Mu Yen refine pills, and their eyes lit up. Such speed, method, and rate of forming pills was truly rare in this world. This girl's alchemy talent is stronger than this old man. Young people nowadays are truly getting better and better. The Grand Elder of the medicine sect sighed and said. Hearing his words, the other Grand Elders were very surprised. You must be joking. The Grand Elder of the vast mountain sect said, you old fellow is an advanced level grade 7 alchemist, how can that little girl compare to you? No, in terms of refining advanced level grade 6 pills, this old man is inferior. The Grand Elder of the medicine sect added, even if I'm refining the pills she did now, at my best, I can only refine 10 pills, and not each of them would definitely be high quality. Lu girl not only refined 15, but each is at high quality, and the success rate is basically 100%. The Grand Elder of the medicine sect gave a cryptic look at the smiling ancestor Tian Xian and felt extremely unhappy. Why wasn't Lu Mu Yen, a pupil with such talent in alchemy, in the medicine sect? When the two golden-clothed and silver-clothed brothers' pills were only refined halfway, Lu Mu Yen already finished refining the wine pills, and the quality was even higher than theirs. The hearts of the two couldn't help sinking. Lu Mu Yen ignored the other people's gazes. She took out some high-level spiritual fruits and spiritual herbs, crushed them, tossed them into the wine cauldron, then took out a few bottles of spiritual water she had collected and poured it in. Finally, she picked up a jar and poured part of the rich and fragrant millennium-old royal jelly into it. She didn't use anything to stir it, but instead placed her palms on the side of the wine cauldron and used her inner strength to even out the contents of the wine cauldron. When the pills, spiritual herbs, spiritual fruits, and the royal jelly in the wine cauldron were all completely dissolved, a cluster of purple gold flames jumped out from her fingertips. She had advanced to sword deity cultivation base, and no longer needed to cover up her real natal spirit flame. The requirements to become a spiritual wine master were very strict. In addition to being an alchemist and having the talent for winemaking, one must also be very proficient in the control of heat, otherwise the wine would become sour. She controlled the spirit flame in her hands little by little, sometimes large, sometimes small, and throughout the entire process of brewing spiritual wine, she had a solemn and serious look on her face. She brewed spiritual wine with movements like floating clouds and flowing water, and each frown and movement were pleasing to the eye. It was as if the people present weren't watching someone brew wine but admiring an ancient picture scroll that was static and dynamic. The voices around gradually disappeared, and everyone stared at Lu Mu Yan's movements. Even people who didn't know anything about winemaking were seriously attracted to her. After an hour, a faint fragrance of wine wafted out from the wine cauldron, which made the people present feel relaxed and happy and incomparably energetic. Afterwards, Lu Mu Yen removed her spirit flame, and with a flip of her palm, layers of frost enveloped the wine cauldron. The refreshing aroma of wine exuded an even more mouth-watering scent under the cooling of the ice. The alcoholics couldn't resist but swallow. Such fine wine was truly unheard of. Lu Mu Yen didn't immediately take the wine out of the cauldron. Only after it was chilled for 2 hours could this spiritual wine achieve the best flavor and taste. Then she took out the 7-colored glazed cauldron to refine another type of wine pill, took out a few golden-colored blood sacks and 2 moonlight herbs and tossed them into another wine cauldron. This time, the heat was more difficult to control than last time, but she was still very skilled, and there was no pause in her movements. When the blood sack wine began to freeze, she uncovered the previous wine cauldron and a refreshing aroma of wine hit everyone's nostrils. She turned her head to look at the two who hadn't yet finished brewing wine. The corners of her lips raised slightly, and she spit out 2 words, "You lost."